Jeffers, like so many right-handed batters for the Twins this year, struggling against lefties. High fly, left center field and deep. Carlson going back to the wall. It's gone, a home run. Ryan Jeffers, and it'll come in all right. Deep to left field, into the third deck. Michael Taylor green-lighted, and it's another 2-run home run.
I'd say overall it's a positive. Obviously, it's never good when we lose, but, really it was 2 pitches. One of them I wish I could have back. One of them tipped my cap to the guy swinging it. But after that second inning, was kind of able to settle in a little bit, started using the changeup and the slider a little bit more, and seemed to keep guys off balance, got some quick outs, and got me into that 6th inning.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That is what it sounded like last night on the Twins TV network. We got to play their highlights because they were the ones that had the highlights.
The Jolly
Alex.
Rogers.
No, different team.
Oh.
Close enough, though.
Sorry.
So, Matthew
Fly the
Liberatore. It's fine. Pretty much what we expected. Went more than 5 innings. You'll take that. Gave up more runs than you'd like. Prefer not to have that. Gave up a couple of homers. Not ideal. Alex, this is what we wanted. This is the opportunity that Liberatore deserves. Next comes the necessary adjustments from Liberatore. The 2 biggest things with him, I mean, it's pretty simple to evaluate him. A, does he land the curveball for strikes? B, does he keep his velocity up? If he does those 2 things, he's a major league starter. He can be a number 5 starter for you next year, and you feel fine about it. Last night, he did neither. In the first inning, his fastball velo was right around 94 miles an hour. He topped out about 95.
Come on, man. He threw 11 pitches in a 1-2-3 inning.
In the 6th inning, that was fine. If he's averaging around 94 on his fastball velo, you feel pretty good about it. The problem is what happens with Liberatore and a lot of his starts out around 94, finishes the game around 92, maybe even below. That's what happened last night. By the 6th inning, he was down to 92 on average. He topped out at 93. He wasn't getting that increased velo at the end of the game. He didn't have a lot left in the tank. And more importantly, the opponent was just sitting on his fastball because he could not land the curveball for a strike to save his life. He threw it 18 times, 14 of them were balls. If you're going to do that in a game, they can tell pretty early on if you have command of it or not. They're just going to spit on it. You're going to say, you know what, I'm not swinging at the curveball. It's his best pitch. The velo on his fastball is not there. It doesn't have a whole lot of bite to it. It's pretty straight. I'm going to sit on that, and then I'm going to hit it out of the park. And that's what happened last night against the Twins. He should go out there every 5th day. Last night is no reason to give up on this experiment whatsoever. But there's going to come a point in time at the end of this year where they have to evaluate it and say to themselves, is it worth giving him another shot next year for Matthew Liberatore to be in your rotation? That's what the rest of this year is all about.
Yeah, by no means did I see Matthew Liberatore last night and think, oh, yeah, he's going to compete for a rotation spot. Frankly, if we saw it, we're thinking this guy doesn't have a shot at this. But the rest of this season, don't care. Going to go out there. I loved the quotes that Katie had in her piece, Katie Wu on The Athletic, of what Ollie had said to him. Like, hey, you've been uptight all season long of wondering if you're bad. Do you go back to AAA? He said, rest your shoulders. Take a breath, because the rest of this season, you're getting every start. And that's the perfect way for you to evaluate your talent, is to tell them, hey, don't worry about AAA. Don't worry about riding the bus back to Memphis. You're here for the remainder of the season. So figure out what you did in that start, what went poorly, and how we fix it for the next, because you're going to have 5-6 more starts before the end of the season, and that is going to give us the perfect opportunity to evaluate if you're a part of this rotation next season, or if you're starting the year underneath this depth chart of starters who could compete in spring training. So it wasn't overwhelming. Frankly, it was a bad outing once again for Matthew Liberatore. You don't have the swing and miss stuff. Ollie talked about him really not using that curveball effectively, which is his swing and miss pitch. And if you're not using that and you're getting beat up on your fastball, well, you're not going to fit into the Cardinals model that they're searching for next season.
Yeah, I just have a tough time seeing the road for him to get into the rotation for next year, because I just can't see him turning things around, maintaining velocity, generating more swing and miss with his curveball. His fastball still gets crushed against right-handed batters. Though, yes, I agree he should be starting at remain in the rotation for the rest of the year. His path forward to get into that rotation is going to be so hard that I think it's almost impossible to see it for me. I just think I know what Matthew Liberatore is, and I get it. You're giving him opportunities. They're saying all the right things publicly. I just can't go into next year, no matter what happens, I think, penciling in Matthew Liberatore as a 5. I just don't see the upside in Matthew Liberatore. No command of the fastball last night, in my opinion. Changeup was okay. Slider was fine. And again, didn't have a curveball. But even when he's had the curveball in starts past, it hasn't been that effective to where it's like, oh, wow, I can see what they're looking at here. He reminds me so much of Luke Weaver, where it was always potential, and then I just watched Luke Weaver pitch. I'm like, yeah, I don't see it. So I can't see a path for him putting himself into the number 5 conversation. But again, with that said, I think you still start him every day because maybe he proves me wrong, but I just don't see it. I can't see a scenario where you say to yourself, we're going into next season with either Dakota Hudson or Matthew Liberatore as our number 5.
I don't think it's going to be an either with 2 guys, though. I think it's going to be one of with 4 or 5 different names. And I don't mind Liberatore being in that competition. What you can prove by the end of this season, at least to me, is your name at the top of that list, or is your name underneath Dakota Hudson, insert free agent name here, and McGreevy and Graceffa? That's what you're going to figure out by the end of this season.
So here's the problem with Matthew Liberatore. Since he was called up last year, opposing hitters have a better batting average against him than Aaron Judge has in that span.
Wow.
Well,
Opposing hitters have the same on-base percentage against him as Juan Soto has in that span. And they have the same slugging percentage against him as Pete Alonso has in that span.
He hasn't been good.
So you have a hitter that is some combination of the best version of Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso against your starting pitcher. That's what the numbers would indicate against Matthew Liberatore. And none of that matters to me right now. I'm okay with giving him the rest of this season to find out if he can do what T-Bone just said, which is pencil his name into that number 5 spot. For me, there's nothing he can do to write it in pen, but he can be a part of the conversation where I have confidence enough in him to pencil him into that spot, and then it becomes a competition between him and other guys as well. But I posted this on Twitter earlier today, and I asked a very simple question. Which of these pitchers is most likely to be in the Cardinals rotation on opening day of 2024? Sonny Gray, Tyler Glasnow, Lucas Giolito, or Matthew Liberatore? 72% of the responses so far say Matthew Liberatore. Makes sense. He's a part of your roster right now. The other guys, you would have to go out and make that move.
That screams the lack of faith in the front office. If anything.
I would not go Matthew Liberatore. I would say Sonny Gray is more likely to be in this rotation next year than Matthew Liberatore on opening day, because I don't think that we're going to see a change in results. I am more skeptical of Matthew Liberatore's performance than I am of the Cardinals front office. And that speaks, I don't know, pretty lowly of Matthew Liberatore, I would say, in terms of where I'm at on him right now. I just don't know how I can have confidence that this is going to change overnight. And that's basically what would have to happen. He's got, 8 starts left the rest of the way, most likely? Something around there?
Yeah.
Do I think he's going to do a lot in the 8 starts that remain to change my evaluation of him as a player? Probably not. I think next year, for me, he's going to be a part of the Cardinals bullpen, more likely than he is to be a part of their rotation. I would have him on the Steven Matz plan in terms of go to the bullpen and hone in your best stuff. 2025, we can have a new conversation. But I think the hope for next year is let's get him to a place where his stuff plays at the major league level. We know he can do it down in AAA. There's nothing left for him to prove down there. When he goes down, he performs pretty well right now. When he comes back up, though, you start to see some of the struggles because the guys up here take better swings than the guys that are down at AAA. So I would have him up, but I would have him most likely, depending on what happens the rest of the way, in the bullpen. But they're doing this right. You should have him starting every 5th day and see what it looks like.
And I don't think people should get frustrated if he does become a bullpen arm next year, saying, oh, you don't know how you're doing, you can't evaluate pitching, and Cardinals are doing this all wrong. I think the Cardinals basically, and I understand everybody's texts that are coming into our Air Comfort Service text line saying, he's still young, you got to figure out what he is. The Cardinals might already know what he is. I mean, they apparently know exactly what Zach Thompson is. They send him back and think he's a starting pitcher, and then he comes back and he's a bullpen arm. That might be Liberatore. And we talked about this yesterday at the end of the show. I don't think it's a bad thing if you go on the same trajectory as what an Andrew Miller did. Now, is he going to be the same player? Highly doubtful. But if he's got that swing and miss stuff with the curveball, maybe he doesn't need to be a starting pitcher. Maybe you just need one solid inning out of Matthew Liberatore from the left side, which might not be the worst thing in the world for this Cardinals team.
And every bullpen arm is a failed starter, essentially. Like, that's why Andrew Chafin wears the T-shirt. Because that's what most of them are. Ryan Helsley was a starter at one point. Jordan Hicks, who the Cardinals just traded, was a starter at one point. So it just means that those guys are better off with one inning of max effort than they are as a guy that's relied upon to go 5 or 6. So it wouldn't be a failure if he has success in the bullpen. I think it might be the path that they have to explore. It's either that or you keep starting him in AAA, and though he doesn't have a lot to prove, hopefully you hone in his stuff down there, and then he's just that depth guy that comes up when you deal with injuries next year.
I would also add this. I'm not giving up on him for next season or beyond. Like, he is still really young. I don't think that you just I'm not treating Matthew Liberatore the way that I am like a Tyler O'Neill, for example, where this offseason you just trade him,
Or
right?
Dylan Carlson.
Exactly. I didn't want to mention the name.
Why, buddy?
I think they might be the same age.
Carlson's a year older.
What a grandpa.
You can keep him around. He's got options. He's got flexibility. There's no reason to rush this in terms of making a decision that you will live to regret. But you can put him into your bullpen and extract some value from him at the major league level. Now that you've started the service time stuff, like it's all starting to click, right? Let's find out what he can do next year and find out what he's got the rest of the way. But out of the two guys that started last night, man, Sonny Gray was the one that, to me, looked like the type of pitcher that I want in my rotation next year. That guy looked great, man. I don't know what he is going to get in the offseason. I would assume he's going to be tagged with a qualifying offer. But for me, that is the type of pitcher that I'm looking for in the Cardinals rotation in 2024 and beyond. So I want to talk to Eno Sarris about exactly that. He's a baseball writer for The Athletic. He breaks down pitching as well, Alex, in my mind, as anybody that you can read on the internet right now. Eno Sarris is going to give us his take on the Cardinals rotation plans moving forward next year on 101 ESPN. Cardinals have some pitching questions, and when we've got those questions, we know who to call. It's Eno Sarris. He's a baseball writer for The Athletic. I listen to him each week on The Athletic's baseball podcast, which dropped this week as well. You can find him there. You can find him on Twitter at Eno_Sarris. Eno, we appreciate the time as always, my man. How you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the Cardinals pitching questions, because going into 2024, they've got two guys that are under contract that you feel good about. It's Miles Mikolas and Steven Matz. When you see a team that has those kinds of serious questions going into the offseason with their rotation, your immediate thought is what,
A lot of work to do. No, one thing I did like about what they did at the deadline was they got a lot of close arms. So I think at least in Tekoa Roby and Drew Rom, they've got guys that could debut next year. And the difficulty is you can't pencil either in for a major league rotation spot. But what you can do is say, hey, the two of these guys combined can be our number 6. Like one of these guys can come up when we need a starter. They've got options, and we get them under our wing, and we hope that they're ready to go next year. They seem that close.
Is Matthew Liberatore in that same range for you? We saw him last night, and I don't really know what to make of him at this point. He's still very young. He's just 23 years old, but the fastball velo seems to dip down as the game goes on, and he couldn't land his curveball again last night. Where's Matthew Liberatore fit into that mix for you?
I think you may not have a choice other than to slot him in at number 5 and hope there's some improvement. He has improved the shape of his fastballs a little bit over time, and yet they just aren't necessarily, I don't want to say competitive. Like, they're not good shapes. Like they're easy to spot. The sinker is about average and the four seam is a little bit below average. And because he's a left-hander, he has to throw the four-seam a lot. If I was coaching him, I would consider ramping up the breaking ball usage, even lefty on righty, in order to use that four-seam less. So I still think there's some tinkering that can be done. The breaking balls are major league quality. So that's something you can start with. And there are other pitchers around the league who figured out how to pitch off of an elite breaking ball. Without a great fastball. I mean, it's old people, but, think of Rich Hill and Adam Wainwright, those guys have elite breaking balls, and their fastballs aren't great either. So, there's got to be a way for Liberatore to make it work with those good breaking balls.
So, you talked about a couple of these Cardinals pitchers and being guys who could be 6s for them next season. Do you see anybody else in their system that could be in their 1 through 5 next year? Obviously not 1 or 2, but somebody who could be your 4 or 5 for them next year?
I think I had some good numbers on, I don't know how to say his name,
Graceffo, yeah.
Graceffo. I think that there's something to like there, and he's obviously pretty close. So, one thing that is a problem in St. Louis, and leadership has admitted this recently, is that they kind of have to change their organizational philosophy a little bit with regards to pitching development. I mean, they admitted this publicly, that they have to think a little bit more about swing and miss rather than pitching to contact. So, they got to turn that tanker around. And, I like Cooper. Cooper can miss some bats, but he's been hurt, and he's, an A-ball. So, the actual turning around of the pitching development process may take that long. So, I don't know. I think that some of it may have to be at the big league level in terms of free agents. And what I would try to do is try to sign 2 major league starting free agents with a little bit more of an accent on missing bats.
So that's where I wanted to get to next, because that's what they said at the press availability this week is Mo made it very clear. Hey, we know we've got a lot of work to do going into the offseason. They see it as 3 spots in the rotation that, whether it's via trade or free agency, maybe one of these young guys stepping up, but they've got to fill those spots somehow. When you look to this upcoming free agent class, it's an interesting class. I don't know if it's a great one starting pitching-wise, but we've talked about Aaron Nola, Lucas Giolito, Sonny Gray, Blake Snell, and others that are kind of at the top of that market. Do you have guys that you think are free agents this offseason that make sense for the St. Louis Cardinals to go out there and look to acquire?
I'm trying to populate that group. I know that Giolito is in it. Who else are you thinking about?
Aaron Nola is somebody that we've talked a lot about. I would love to get your thoughts on him in particular because he's the innings eater, but it kind of feels like signing Miles Michaelis all over again. Is that a fair comparison for him with what his stuff is right now?
Yes, except it's Miles Michaelis plus. I mean, he does have. I think the breaking ball is an elite breaking ball, and I think he will. I think he'll age well because, like Michaelis, he has excellent command. So I think I would definitely rather spend a little bit more for him than spend less and get Lucas Giolito. So. Yeah, I think Aaron Nola is at the top of my list. I mean, if they can't get Ohtani.
Yeah, well, there we go. We
don't even talk about the guys at the top of the market here in St. Louis anymore. It's just not worth spending our time on them.
We've got the Mississippi River. He would love that.
Yeah.
The one thing that actually hurts them in ways that I know that Ohtani, if they're other than numbers and money. One of the things that will really matter to him is that the team he's going to is at the forefront of pitching development and data and technology.
Good.
Okay, so the Cardinals are out of it then is what you're saying,
So anyway.
So back to talking about Aaron Nola.
Yeah. As much as I wonder what Stroman will do.
Not St. Louis, I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
He won't be here.
Yeah.
What about Blake Snell, Like, we've talked a lot about him, and obviously he has that.
You're missing bats guy.
but, like, does that make sense for the Cardinals, and do you think the Cardinals make sense to him?
The one thing about Blake Snell is that you'll have to have a good middle of your bullpen. He's just a guy that comes out in the fifth inning, in the sixth inning. He's so high volume in terms of all those walks and strikeouts that, you have to be able to put somebody in there in the sixth inning, which means your bullpen has to be good too. Okay. The Cardinals bullpen has actually, I think, been one of their strengths recently. So that's not impossible for them to do. But it's part of the package. So, he will cost a lot less than Aaron Nola, though. I would assume, and you might be able to get one of those Kevin Gossman, Robbie Ray deals where it's like 5 years and 100 something, as opposed to I wonder if Nola's going to try and get 6 and a little bit more.
When you look at this free agent market, one of the other guys that we've talked a lot about, you kind of skipped over him. I'm curious with Lucas Giolito, how do you view him at this point in his career?
I think it's just super tough. He has not gotten his fastball back to where it was when he was elite, and so sometimes you can look at some peripherals and look here and look at strikeout rate and some of that stuff and talk yourself into Giolito. But if his fastball isn't an elite shape, he's got this straight changeup, and changeups aren't necessarily the best pitch for strikeouts. And so it'd be kind of betting in a way on a weak contact profile, despite the fact that he does have a decent strikeout rate. I think Snell is actually a good name for them because I think he'll be attainable. He won't cost necessarily the very top of the market. I would assume that Aaron Nola and maybe Julio Urias are the top of the market. And then you've got Giolito and Snell probably the next two. And if you can get Snell to a Gossman type contract, I think I'd be into it.
One more from me, and obviously a lot for the Cardinals to accomplish with all this pitching via free agency, and that takes us to the trade side of things, to where maybe they can accomplish finding somebody via trade with their cost-controlled position players. Are there names via trade that you feel like the Cardinals should target if they are offering up guys like Nootbaar or Donovan or Gorman?
I mean, I love Mariners pitching development. They have just turned out starter after starter after starter with elite strikeout rates, and I would take any of those guys if the Mariners were talking. And that seems like a natural fit, because the Mariners are always looking to try and improve their lineup. It's kind of like the Marlins and the Mariners are the two trade partners that are always there for the Cardinals.
Would you be able to justify trading a Nolan Gorman or Brendan Donovan for one of those pitchers?
I would trade Brendan Donovan, yes. And if it had to be a package with Donovan and O'Neill, I would do that. There are definitely some packages I would put together. Gorman does what I love, which is hit the crap out of the ball.
You and our producer, Tanner Hendrickson, are on that same page.
Slug, baby, slug.
I'm on the on-base side. Tanner's on the slug, baby, slug side, and we have a little bit of a battle on that. But, if Donovan ends up having crazy value on the market, I totally understand how you would get there. Is there a specific starter within that rotation that you would like the most for the Cardinals, Eno, or would you just say, you know what, whatever you can get out of this, just take one of those guys, you feel pretty good about it?
It's just what makes their pitching development so great is that they're all so different. If you want to bet on a fastball, then you bet on Logan Gilbert, and you get him. He's a little bit further along, having played the 2 years or whatever. If you want to bet on an elite breaking ball, that's Brian Wu. I think my favorite actually might be Bryce Miller, because that's an elite breaking ball elite fastball. And then the breaking balls are, they look good on paper, but from what I can see, hitters can actually tell the release point is different on those breaking balls. So I feel like there's something there where you could work with him and make him even better.
All right, Eno, I want to ask you about two more players. We'll get you out of here after that. Hugely appreciate the time, as always. One of them is an international free agent. The other is a guy that we saw last night here in St. Louis, which is, and they're kind of two different portions of the market. Sonny Gray, what do you think his market could look like this offseason, and do you project him to age well? And the other one is a guy that I don't know, frankly, a whole lot about. It's Yoshinobu Yamamoto. How do you feel like those guys are going to fare in this year's free agent market?
Yeah, Yamamoto, I think, is going to be near the top, too. I think he will be maybe in that Blake Snell grouping. I think it's going to be pretty a fervent market for him. So I like that. But what I like even better is a lefty named Shota Imanaga in Japan, who had the best. I have a stat called Stuff Plus. He had the best Stuff Plus in the WBC out of anybody, and I don't think he'll cost as much. And I think he might, equal Yamamoto. So if you could get Shota Imanaga and Blake Snell, you could remake your rotation pretty quickly. It may cost you $150, $175 million.
I hope I'm pronouncing this correct. Imanaga, is he going to be a free agent this offseason? He's coming over?
He's coming over.
Interesting. Okay.
And he's just less heralded, and he's got a great fastball shape, and he's got silly strikeout numbers in Japan this year. The strikeout numbers usually poured over. Where you're nervous when you bring a guy over from Japan is the walk rates. Sometimes they are bigger, sometimes they're not, You can even see that with Kodai Senga, who's come over, and he's striking guys out, but the walk rate sort of ballooned a little bit when he came over. So, they can do their own scouting on that and see what they think of Imanaga's command. My own scouting is that it's great. Sonny Gray, I think, is, not someone that you can count on for 180 innings every year, but he does have that elite breaking ball, and, that is something that I think ages well. I don't think I'm being anecdotal when I point to these older starters around the league that have done really well with an elite breaking ball. I think you can spin a ball forever. And, Adam Wainwright, it worked until he was throwing 86, 85, So I think that the Sonny Gray, that's a little bit far off in the future for him. He's still throwing in the low 90s. So I would also sign Sonny Gray. I think that grouping is the one that's exciting for me.
We appreciate the time, man. I think you just found the Cardinals free agent acquisition this offseason, a 30-year-old lefty from Japan that's going to be a secondary market type of guy.
He's a lefty.
That is the most Cardinals pitcher I could possibly imagine them signing, a guy that nobody else had heard of. It might be a good one. Might end up working out for him. Hey, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the rest of this season. Hopefully we'll talk with you again in the offseason when some of these moves are actually made by the Cardinals.
All right, thanks for having me.
You got it. That's Eno Sarris joining us here on 101 ESPN. Hugely appreciate his time. He just discovered a pitcher for us, Alex. That
Imanaga.
Shota Imanaga.
I'm going to have to say that over and over so I remember it.
He is 30 years old. He's 5'10", 175 pounds. He throws from the left side, and he's got pretty good swing and miss stuff. And he was teammates with Lars Nootbaar on Team Japan in the World Baseball
so he's coming
Classic.
along with Shohei. You're getting all of them.
This is it. I can't believe that we spent a second talking about any other pitcher. This guy's not going to have the QO.
He's a lefty.
He's 30.
And he pitched in Japan.
There's your Cardinal.
And Lars Nootbaar will stay here.
Him and Sonny Gray will be Cardinals next year. There's your offseason.
Can I still get Nola or Snell?
Or Giolito?
No, but you're going to trade for one of the Mariners starters.
Oh, okay.
How do you feel about that?
That's a good offseason right there. Now, you do have a little bit of question marks surrounding the main guy that you signed, meaning Imanaga. But
let's say
I'm okay with those question marks.
Your offseason is Imanaga, Sonny Gray, and you trade for Bryce Miller. So you got the lowest of the Mariners starters, but a guy that can project to be something more. He's still very young, and he could immediately be a 3 in your rotation next year. How do you feel about that rotation? Because you got a cost-controlled guy, secondary market, so we're saying
I don't know if you have
18 to 20 on each of the top 2 starters.
You don't have an ace, though.
No. That's what I was just about to say. It feels a lot like the rotation from 21. And look, again, I think that 21... I think 21's the year I'm thinking of. Or 22, sorry, 22. Where it is I can squint and I can go, okay, they have arms that can get them through the regular season, but what will they do in the postseason?
The upside is there. I mean, you've got legit swing and miss stuff at this point.
I think the problem there, though, is though you have some swing and miss, I don't know if it's elite swing and miss.
I think what I would rather do is make the trade, and rather than sign Gray and Imanaga, sign Snell or Nola, and then go get a low-end guy. If that makes sense. So you got the number 1. I got my high upside. I got my number 1, and then I'm filling the rotation with a veteran who's cheaper and not taking the shot on those 2 guys that I'm bringing in.
Yeah, that seems great. Now get excited about the fact that they're going to get a secondary market guy like Imanaga. That's what you're getting instead.
I was going to say, and here's the thing too. Is
I think
top of what I said, or
no?
Bleep that. I don't want that. That's trash.
I love the idea of Blake Snell. The more I think about it. Lefty, high strikeout rate, all of that stuff makes so much sense for what the Cardinals are looking for.
He sold me on Aaron Nola too. I know you guys say it's Miles Michaelis stuff, but I mean, if you get a guy who looks and his stuff seems like it's going to age well, we've seen guys that have that. Aaron Nola still to me might be my number 1.
This is where he makes sense. Classic Cardinals signing. He has a very high floor. I'm pretty confident next year he's not going to be bad for you. And I think over the life of the contract, he's going to give you, barring injury, which you could say about everybody, 160-plus innings and a sub-4.5 ERA.
Let's say half of his contract, if it's a 6-year contract, a half, if not 4 of those 6 years, he's a 1, 2, or a 3 for you. I'd call that a win.
I think it's really similar to Michaelis. And that's where it just comes down to, would you sign another Michaelis? He doesn't anymore. He doesn't have ace stuff the way that he once did. The velocity's coming down. The swing and miss is coming down. He no longer has legit ace stuff. Their ace is Zach Wheeler now in Philadelphia. So if you feel good about adding another Miles Michaelis with more swing and miss, he's Michaelis plus. I liked the way that Eno said that. Then you sign him. And I would not crush them for doing so. I get it. I really do. It makes sense to me. I would go with the Blake Snell side because of the upside. But you guys know I'm always a little bit more baked into what the upside is as opposed to what the potential downside is, what the potential risk is that's involved with these signings. Because Blake Snell, as he mentioned, you're getting a 5 or 6 inning starter there. With a guy like Aaron Nola, he's going 7 regularly for you. Now, might end up giving up 3 earned runs with 4 strikeouts, but he's getting through 7. He's going to eat those innings. So it really comes down to, what do you value more? Do you value the certainty of a guy that's going to go out there every 5th day and will give you innings at the end of the year, or the guy that he may well go out there and throw a no-hitter, and then the next start might give you 4 innings? That's Blake Snell. So it really just depends which one of those sides of things they value more, and they might end up doing multiple of these things. Sign an upside pitcher, sign a high ceiling or high floor pitcher. I don't know, man. It's why this offseason is so compelling with what they have available to them in the starting pitching market. Speaking of what teams decide to do when they've got some tough decisions on their hands, guys, the Capitals made a big move earlier today. How would Doug Armstrong approach this situation? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Taylor Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals fell to the Minnesota Twins last night 5-3 as they dropped 2 of 3 against Minnesota, and they start a 3-game set against Colorado tonight. 7:15 will be first pitch as Chris Flexen gets the start for Colorado, and Adam Wainwright will be on the mound for St. Louis. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. So there was a big news story that popped up earlier this morning. The Washington Capitals have signed Tom Wilson to a 7-year deal worth $45 million. Now, Tom Wilson is a guy that consistently scores, 15 to 20 goals per year. He's the enforcer for the team. He's certainly been in the headlines over the last, his entirety of his career, mostly. 29 years old, Alex. Going to be 30 years old this upcoming season for the Washington Capitals. They are trying to stay competitive at the back end of what they're seeing from Ovechkin while he tries to break the record. This is a move that I wonder if Doug Armstrong would have made it if he was in the same spot. Because we've seen one of the things that Doug Armstrong has been really good at is not getting emotional, not staying too tied to the core, even after they've had a lot of success with your team. So we've seen, Alex Pietrangelo, you want to know move clause? Sorry, you don't get that here. Ryan O'Reilly, you want term and AAV? Sorry, not going to do that at your age. Vladimir Tarasenko, love you, man, but we're going to have to break this thing off in terms of the relationship between the two sides. He doesn't get emotional. He decides what is best for my hockey club. I'm going to go ahead and make those moves. It seems like Washington, some of the moves that they have been making, the same thing is true in Pittsburgh, and I think it's why they're in the situations they're in now, have been emotional. Hey, we've got Sidney Crosby. We've got Alex Ovechkin. We've got to keep the core that they want around them around until they're gone here. Alex, how do you think Doug Armstrong would approach these situations?
I don't think Doug Armstrong would have been ruthless in the sense of saying, no, we're not giving you a contract, we're moving on. I think he would have approached Tom Wilson and said, we want you back, what's it going to cost? But when Tom Wilson's side came to the table and said 7 years at $6.5 million per year, Doug would have walked away. Because that's a lot of money for a 29-year-old who's only gone over 50 points in a season once. And to me, the moment I saw that contract signing, I said, that's Braden Schen's contract. And Braden Schenn signed it when he was 2 years younger. And Braden Schenn has been a multi-50-point season type of player. Frankly, he's on average somewhere between 22 and 25 goals per season. And Tom Wilson, at best, is 22 goals, 25 goals on a season. So Doug would have approached it, and Doug would have said, we want you back, but it's going to be for 3-4 years, and we're going to give you about $5 million per year. And then both sides would have separated and would have been, Doug's ruthless and walks away. I just think Doug realizes how much certain players cost and what the projection looks like. But this is the side part of it, and T-Bone brought up the great point in the office. I don't think that's Doug Armstrong's decision. That's Alex Ovechkin's decision. Because when you have a franchise-altering player, i.e. Alex Ovechkin chasing down Wayne Gretzky's record, you keep who he says you want. Like Alex Ovechkin is only re-upped in Washington because he said, Nicholas Backstrom is my center for the remainder of my career, and I want Tom Wilson on my team for the remainder of my career. Sidney Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are a part of this roster moving forward. So as much as Doug Armstrong would have a say in this, I think when you've got a player who does have, I don't want to say control, but has a say in the organization because how impactful he truly is, I think that player dictates contracts like this.
Yeah, I think Army Price still would have been a little bit ruthless, and I think he would have done what Alex said, where he goes to Wilson and says, look, what do you want? Wilson says, I want this contract that he just signed, and I think Army would have said, you're not getting that. I don't think you can get that on the open market. So either come back to the table with us because we really want you. We can even negotiate a little bit more in your favor, but you're not getting the deal that you just signed. But it's tough because though Petrel was a great player, David Backes was a great player here, those guys don't fall into the same ilk as a Alex Ovechkin or a Sidney Crosby, where I can understand keeping the band together and kind of reaching on contracts because you're talking about arguably 2 top 100 players in NHL history, and you're trying to keep them there for the length of their career and trying to keep them happy. So I do think Army would have reached a little bit for some of his decision making. I don't think it would be as easy as, well, we're not bringing back Braun because he's aging. We're not bringing back O'Reilly because he's aging. No, I think he would have to have some decisions if he had a player of those ilk on the roster, to where he probably would have to stretch himself to where he is uncomfortable at times to keep them happy and make sure that they keep the quote unquote band together.
By the way, I'm glad that Washington's doing this. Now, it's going to be miserable for the next 5-6 years once Ovechkin calls it a career and you're stuck with some of these contracts. But this, as a fan, I don't want to see Alex Ovechkin leave. I don't want to see Backstrom leave. And to do that, I got to keep Tom Wilson, who's a really fun player. Fine by me. Let's continue to try every year. And when it falls apart, it's going to fall apart massively.
And to be fair, this is going to age poorly. Tom Wilson's contract will be seen when Dom writes this article next year about the worst contracts in the NHL. Tom Wilson will be right up at or near the top of the list.
Dom's already starting his Twitter phase of it.
Yeah, because it's a
nice to do
bad
somebody not to
deal
lose.
analytically speaking, because this is not a guy that drives a lot of offense. He's going to eventually hit that age curve where he's on the downside of his career and you're paying him $6+ million on an AAV. It's not going to age well, but it's something you have to do. The Lakers did this with Kobe Bryant at the end of his career, right? We saw he made a ton of money. He was not the same player that he was, but guess what? He retired as a Laker because that's what they do. They take care of their guys. This year, Adam Wainwright making $17.5 million. You know what? It was worth it. It was. For him to be a Cardinal his entire career, you pay for that. Yadier Molina, that last contract, it was not a good deal by any measurement for the St. Louis Cardinals. But guess what? It was worth it because he retired as a Cardinal here in St. Louis and he never played anywhere else. Sometimes you do these things because you have to, because these guys mean more to your franchise by staying happy and sticking with your franchise until the end of their career than it does to have good contracts around them. So you pay the freight. The Blackhawks did this with some of their guys. The Capitals are doing it. The Penguins are doing it. And then you live with whatever it is that the results are. They're probably going to be bad this year. They're probably going to be bad for the next 5 years. But guess what? If you're a Capitals fan, you get to go watch Ovi. That's what makes it worth it.
To me, you chase championships, even if you don't see yourself as a championship contender, you still chase them when you've got guys that put butts in the seats like Ovechkin and Crosby. The problem is when you're a team that do not have those types of players or are trying to milk the most out of those players. The one that comes to mind, I told you in the office, the New Jersey Devils. The 1 year they got the MVP out of Taylor Hall, they said, oh man, look how good we are. Let's keep this running. And it fell apart, and now they've been in this rebuild. But you chase it knowing that the rebuild is coming, but you chase it as long as you can have the entertainment factor of a Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Alex Ovechkin, and Tom Wilson, and you suffer the consequences once they're done.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys have any questions, we'll get to those next, and ask us anything, sports or otherwise, here on 101 ESPN.
answers. Maybe it's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Hey, you guys can always check us out on YouTube at 101 ESPN STL is where you go to find us. We stream every show live throughout the day, and then afterwards, if you guys missed anything, you can go over to YouTube and check it out as well. We've got all of the previous shows available for you right over there on YouTube at 101 ESPN STL. Go ahead and subscribe, like, share it with a friend. It's a good way to go ahead and
start
do the
doing
show.
some like themes on YouTube, like Tight Short Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that the shorts really play up on YouTube.
was
It's
thinking
mostly
we
our
can pan the
face.
cameras down.
I don't feel like that's a good
Tuesday.
idea.
Tight Shirt Tuesdays, huh?
Ooh,
I
okay.
got some T-shirts from
White
when I was
T-shirt
in.
Wednesday.
Nobody wants to see that, man.
Oh.
It's a
Oh,
choice.
I thought this was a safe
Frisky
brainstorming
Friday?
here.
Frisky Friday.
Freaky
You can-
Friday?
all of us can wear the Disney lingerie outfits that BK
See,
wore.
there we
Top
go. I've got plenty
Thursday?
for you guys. I'll share them.
He bought a ton
Got 'em
after
at
he
home.
did that one punishment. By the way, I've come up with some BK and Ferrario punishments for our Pick'em challenge, and told BK earlier today, oh, they're spicy.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. Guys, it is official. The Big Ten is going to expand. They are inviting Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. Overnight, it seemed like this was definitely going to happen. This morning, there were a bunch of reports that came out that were like, hey, no, Pac-12's still alive. Very much still alive. And then now it's official. The Pac-12's probably going to die. Oregon or Washington headed to the Big Ten. We'll see what ends up happening with the other teams. As of last night, Arizona seemed
Arizona's
destined for the
connected
Big
somebody.
12. So we'll see what ends up happening from there. How do you think this is going to affect the future of the college football playoff? Because now that you probably aren't going to have a Pac-12 that matters.
I don't know what it almost feels like, I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure how much the Big 12 matters at this point either. Big 12 ACC are clearly in a second tier.
So what is it, the Big Ten and the SEC?
Yeah, I mean,
so you got your two
If you're
conferences
going to
already?
have two super conferences, does the playoff just become like the top four from each conference get in?
I mean, it should.
It might.
I mean, that's kind of how it feels
what
it's
you
going.
could do eventually is just like make it to where you're having a conference championship game that is the first round of the playoff in some regard.
Yeah.
You know, like you could end up having like the top two teams or the top four teams in the SEC and the top four teams in the Big Ten, like battle it out to see who plays each other in the national championship game.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's expanding. What are we getting up to? What's the number? I should know this. Expansion, 12 teams.
Oh, yeah,
let's
that's
go
right,
to 12.
So we're going to 12. So you could have like 8 of the 12 spots from the Big Ten in the SEC, and then the other 4 are like the automatic qualifiers, which could come from the Big Ten or the SEC, or could come from elsewhere. Something like that makes some sense.
Yeah, I can see where they go with that, where you've got 8 coming from those 2, the automatic qualifiers, and there's one that's, if I remember correctly, one that is not a non-Power 5 conference, or Power 4. I don't know how we're going to define it anymore, but yeah, I could see where it ends up going to where like, basically, you're going to see like probably 2 Ohio State, Michigan duels a year, one in the Big Ten conference play, and then the other in the playoff.
It's going to be interesting, man. I think you're going to see 20-team conferences. That's what we'll get to. And then from there, I don't know which conferences it'll be. That's the thing. Like, there's 2 that matter. It's the Big Ten and the SEC. And this is where I am going to kind of walk back my opinion on Mizzou leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. Now that we are at always the logical end point, it matters that Mizzou has a seat at the table. It matters that Illinois has a seat at the table. You want to be in either the Big Ten or the SEC moving forward, and those 2 teams are there. Like KU, K-State, they've got to figure it out, man. The Big 12's still around, yes, but it's not going to be at the same level ever as the Big Ten or the SEC, and those schools aren't getting invited to the Big Ten or the SEC. If you're Florida State, I get why you're trying to get out of the SEC right now. Clemson should be doing the same thing. Like, the best programs in the country are now deciding this is the time. We are getting to the end point. Now we got to find a way to get our seat at the table.
Has the SEC been connected to any expansion? Like, I've not heard their name.
Not lately, but that can change in a heartbeat, as you know.
Is Notre Dame connected? Or they're not. I know there was talks they might go to the Big Ten, but I haven't seen anything lately.
If they move, they'll go to the Big Ten, but they have such a cush gig where they don't have to be tied to anybody else. They've got their massive TV deal, and that's what everybody's moving for, is for the TV rights.
And when you're the top dog in that conference already, you know you're going to be in the playoff conversation every year.
So Clemson's a team to watch. Florida State will be a team to watch. I wonder what happens with Miami. I would think that they have some value in something like this. like Virginia Tech, Virginia, those schools maybe have some value, but it's probably the biggest ones coming out of the ACC that'll end up having value to other conferences. All right, from the 314, guys, ask us anything. Are you confident that the Cardinals will rewrite their wrongs and will have a great offseason this year? What's your level of confidence?
5. Put it right
Out
in
of 5?
No, God, no. 5 out of 10. I'll put it right in the middle because you had frankly, depending on how this one goes, if it doesn't get any better, historically awful season, and it was because of your decisions that you made in the offseason. So I'm going to put the trust in them that they can't be that insane to say, let's run it back again. But I'm still very skeptical on the sense of righting their wrongs in terms of going after the big fish and just going after a lot of the smaller fish.
I'd probably put myself at a 5 as well. I'm getting more concerned that they're trying to talk themselves into finding somebody internally as a 5 rather than going into the off season and getting 3 starters that they know what they're getting instead of having to pencil in somebody as a 5 and just pray that you get their projection. And also too, like they've got, before they can get the benefit of the doubt, they've got to be willing to spend on a starting pitcher, which they've not been willing to do before. And that's the thing for me is like, sure, I love that we can say, oh, they should be in on Snell, they should be in on Nola. But if those guys get the deals I'm expecting, like that doesn't scream Cardinals. And the way that you change that narrative is by actually doing it. And then the same on the trade market. Like I'm very concerned that they're going to say, well, we're not giving up a Nootbaar for a Miller. We're not giving up a Donovan for a Woo. Like all the names that came out as untouchable at the deadline. And look, there weren't cost control or arms move. So I can hear that argument of like, I shouldn't crush them for that. But the fact that there were so many names that came out around deadline time of this guy's untouchable is very alarming going into an offseason where they probably need to make a trade for a starting pitcher, and it's going to cost them a lot.
You know, the guy that we never heard that about?
Gorman.
Yep. So, on the plus side, the guy that is projecting to be a 40 home run hitter for years to come, that is, 22 years old, 23 years old?
Yeah.
That's the guy that is barely not untouchable.
But yet we can't move Brendan Donovan or Lars Nootbaar. That makes a lot of sense.
I wouldn't do it either. I view them as winning players, so I wouldn't move them. I wouldn't want to move them either. That being said, if that's what it takes to be able to go get the starting pitching that you crave, I could see how you would talk yourself into it. Speaking of that pitching plan going into the offseason, I thought Binfred put it out really well in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. What does your plan look like for the Cardinals going into the offseason? And what is your willingness to take on injury risk within that rotation next year? We'll discuss it next year on 101 ESPN.
looked at really what path we could go down, and we decided to go down the path of just adding as much depth or breadth, if you will, to our system. And I feel like we accomplished that. Now, next year's roster is going to look different. We know that. We weren't at the competitive level we wanted to be, and so change has to happen.
That was John Mozeliak earlier this week talking about what the Cardinals' plans are for their rotation and what they helped themselves do by acquiring a bunch of pitching at the deadline. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex, earlier today I was reading over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and I thought Ben Fred had a really good article on what he believes the Cardinals need to do in order to fix this rotation in the offseason. It lines up with some of what we've been talking about. He wrote the following: what if the Cardinals viewed things this way? Make Miles Mikolas a really solid number 3 starter. You sign or trade for a number 1, a number 2, and a number 4 starter. So you add 3 pitchers that slot in, 2 ahead of Miles Mikolas, 1 right behind him. And then for the number 5 slot, you let Matz, Liberatore, Dakota Hudson, and all of the minor league prospects that you have right now, you battle it out for that number 5 spot in the offseason. That would be his plan. Alex, that's also the plan that I think we've all discussed as well. It's costly, both in terms of prospect capital or major league talent and money. Because to get that number 1 and number 2 starter, you have to improve from what you have right now with Miles Mikolas. That's not an easy thing to do. Miles Mikolas is a pretty solid major league starter. So going out there and getting some of the mid-tier free agents, that doesn't necessarily improve upon him. Like, you can't just go out there and get Michael Lorenzen and say to yourself, all right, we're good. No, because you can't count on Lorenzen being the same guy next year that he was this year. The likelihood is he's more of a 4 or a 5 in the next rotation that he goes into. James Paxton, he doesn't fit this criteria. Alex Cobb, maybe, but I think he's probably more of that number 4 starter for you. So you've got to spend real money, $15+ million, or trade real capital. We're talking about the left-handed bats to be able to pull this off.
Well, let me try and save you some money, BK. Bill, close the wallet for a little bit because you don't need to go find a number 4 starter. Steven Matz will be my number 4 starter. And then my internal options, they'll be number 5. I'll bring in somebody, just throw them a bone to come to St. Louis for some spring training tryouts. But I spend heavy on 1 and 2. I spend heavy on money, DeWallet for that number 1. We've talked plenty about those names, whether it is overseas or whether it's via free agency. And the number 2 is a trade. And it's going to cost you.
What if you don't have to trade for a number 2?
Whose DeWallet are you taking right now?
So hear me out here.
Oh God, this is James Paxton's number 2.
These never start well when BK
Jose Quintana, he can be a number 2.
Hear me out. So Kodai Senga last year, you guys would all agree you'd sign up for him being your number 2 starter right now, right?
Yeah.
He ended up signing a 5-year deal worth $75 million. About 15 a year is what he averaged on his contracts. What if the guy that we talked about earlier today with Eno Sarris, Shota Imanaga, what if he signed a 5-year deal worth $75 million? Basically the exact same deal that we just saw last offseason, another Japanese pitcher come over and take with Kodai Senga. Similar results overseas. They're coming over, 5-year, 75. So 15 a year. And then you sign Blake Snell as the top end of your rotation starter as well. And as we talked about earlier today, or maybe it's Giolito, one of those two, as the guy that's making $25 million a year. So you're not going to the top end of the market. You're just 30. Below that, but you're getting a $25-ish million pitcher and a $15 million pitcher. And now I'm trading for one of the back-end starters from either Miami or Seattle. So I'm not having to trade Nolan Gorman. Maybe I end up trading some of the other stuff that you have in your system right now. Maybe it's an Alec Burleson. It's the second tier, Dylan Carlson, those guys, right? The second tier trade chips that you currently have available to you, and you're packaging them together. Maybe you add in a Ryan Helsley in this package as well. Now, you've added the lefty from Japan. You've added either Giolito or Blake Snell to the front end of your rotation, and you added a cost-controlled arm, so you got cheap on the back end of your rotation to be your number 4. Is that a rotation that you can bet on going into next year and you're like, okay, we fixed this? I think you didn't have to give up significant capital from your prospects.
I think there's questions for Imanaga because you really don't know. Sure. And even Eno said, like, you're talking about somebody who typically comes over and walks a lot. But you know what that upside is. And for $15 million, you'd probably be paying more, closer to $20 million, if you're looking for that same type of pitcher this free agency. So if that was my offseason, if that's the envelope you handed me and said, we got Snell, Imanaga, and one of these young pitchers to be a 4 or a 5 for us, and have Matz and Michaelis and everybody in the system, I'd give that an A. Because I think you did exactly what you were trying to do. You changed the model. You got swing and miss with a guy who has ace upside. You have somebody who you deem to be a legit number 2, maybe can go higher from there, and then you've got the back end of cost controlled with competition in-house. I love that offseason if that's what it is.
Yeah, I like it too. And again, it's tough to kind of dive in on Imanaga because we don't know what he is. But I mean, if you're going off what Eno said, a lefty that's got the same stuff as that top right-handed arm that's coming into the market this year that was dominant at the World Baseball Classic. Yeah, I mean, I'll sign up for that. And like you said, his market's not going to be there for like a Major League pitcher because Major League Baseball is not going to value him as high. So
apparently, Eno sent us an article, Sports Illustrated. Did you see it? Where it was the Diamondbacks, the Blue Jays, the Cardinals, among other teams that were there scouting him recently.
Yeah, they've scouted him over this summer. So there's at least interest in finding out what he is. Now, we don't know if they have interest in signing him. That is the next step here. But we've seen them go over to Japan and have some success with players before. So it would be interesting to see if maybe they're interested in this guy again.
Yeah, but I do like that offseason because you are kind of buying low on a guy that has the making of a number 2, could be a number 1 potentially, like Sanger is right now. And you get him in on a surplus value contract where he probably should be making $20 to $25 million, and instead he's making $15 million. And that's kind of how the Cardinals will have to win because they may not be spending at the top end of that market. And you go out and you get a guy that's a number 4 that's got good swing and miss stuff, like you said. Probably the guy that I first thought of was Rogers, potentially from Miami for Carlson, that swap that we've talked about in the past. And you go out and you get a guy like a Giolito or Snell that has the upside as being A1 currently or is A2 that I believe can become a 1. So, yeah, I think that's a good offseason. And I think that's probably going to be the kind of model that the Cardinals are going to be looking at this offseason.
I think Giolito's more likely than Snell for the Cardinals in this scenario because you've already signed a lefty from Japan. And because Giolito is not attached to that qualifying offer.
Are you kidding me? The more the merrier here in St. Louis.
If I can have 4 lefties in my rotation with 5?
You've got Matz already internally. You've got Liberatore fighting for that spot as well. And you've got the lefty from Japan coming over in this scenario. So I would think you would probably value having another right-handed pitcher. And let's be honest, not having the QO attached to him with Giolito because he was traded probably has some value here in St. Louis as well. So I could see them maybe going that route because it's the path of least resistance. But in this scenario, I do think I feel really good about where they're at rotation-wise going into next year.
Here's my only other question with that. That's $40 million that we just discussed. And then, of course, if you make a trade, you're bringing something in, not sure where that's at. And we said probably around, 50 to 60 mil they're going to spend. Can you fix the bullpen also?
Maybe. I mean, this is where it gets really hard. I just don't know what options are available at a reasonable price. And you've got some internal options with the young arms that you've been able to acquire that might just transition into bullpen arms for you. I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. The arms that they've acquired at the deadline and that are currently in the system, not all of them are going to be starters. And not all of them are going to be developed long-term as starters. Matthew Liberatore might be a reliever for you next year. You might end up transitioning one of the guys that's currently down in AAA, that's in their rotation, into a bullpen arm. Jojo Romero looks pretty good right now. I wouldn't want to count on him as my closer next season, but could that guy be a 6th or a 7th inning arm for you? Yeah. Could you go sign the next Chris Stratton? Sure, $3 million. So I think it's quicker to overhaul the bullpen than sometimes we give it credit for because of how erratic these guys are and how many options you have currently in the system and going out and exploring it on the free agent market because guys sign 1 and 2 year deals, so they're always coming up for the next free agent deal, and you could go out and acquire 1 or 2 of those guys to bolster the bullpen as well.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to be looking to, when we say overhaul, I don't think we're looking at 4 signings in the bullpen. I think one of the lessons they've learned this year was we've got to have more flexibility in the bullpen. What I mean by that is guys that can ride the shuttle bus. I mean, going into this season, they had 5 or 6 guaranteed contracts.
Talked about it going into the year. They had a very limited flexibility within that bullpen.
Yeah, and I think they had just 2 guys. Thompson and I think Packy were the only guys on the opening day roster could be optioned. And Packy got hurt, and Thompson they sent down to start. So that, I think, is one of the lessons. So I think if they're adding to the bullpen, it's probably small deals with guys that still have options, and maybe it's one major league deal for $10 million on a 1-year deal.
I think Dakota Hudson's going to be a bullpen pitcher for them next year. I think he's going to be the role that Drew Verhagen was supposed to have this year, and they'll use that high leverage, multiple innings, then get the spot starts here and
if
there.
it's not Dakota Hudson specifically, it may be the equivalent of Hudson on the market. That maybe they feel a little better about their stuff and they non-tendered Hudson. I don't know who the name will be, but that profile of player I absolutely expect to be in the Cardinals bullpen next year. I would also add this. This is one other question that I wanted to ask you guys, because the rotation that we just talked about, there's upside and certainty baked into it. Lucas Giolito, you kind of know what he is, and he might be a little bit more. You can dream on the upside there if you tweak a couple of things. You're going over to Japan for a guy that you're pretty sure is going to be good, because we've seen so many of these guys at this point transition to the big leagues, and it goes well for the most part. You don't know how well, though. Could be great. He could be your number one next year, and you don't have to worry about that for 5 more years, and you feel great about your rotation. Could be that he's a number 3, and that's not so bad either. Are you willing to take on more risk than that? And what I mean is guys that are injured right now or have a serious injury history. So I'm thinking of like Julio Urias, or going to the market and signing somebody that's coming off of an injury, for example, like a Frankie Montas or a Tyler Mahle, a guy like Michael Wacha, who's had serious injury questions in his past, trading for somebody like a Tyler Glasnow. If you go out and get one pitcher at the front end of your rotation that has certainty, so Giolito, Snell, Nola, one of those types of guys, are you then willing to take on a little bit more risk with the second guy that you go out and acquire, either via trade or free agency?
What do you mean by risk? Like injury? Yeah, I would.
Because a lot of these guys have more upside baked into it. Like, I wouldn't do it with Michael Wacha because the upside is so limited for the most part. Like, I know he's had a couple of good seasons.
Yeah, like you're talking about really like ace upside.
Tyler Mahle, Frankie Montas, guys that I've seen do it at a number 2 or at times a number 1 type of a level. Would you be willing to try? Really, Glasnow's the other guy that you can dream
the
and
one
he's
that
an
makes
ace.
sense. Yeah.
Would you be willing to take on the potential downside of him literally not pitching for you, for the upside of him being a number 2?
I would, as long as you get that number 1. And that's the scenario we've painted right here. And Glasnow, I think, is a perfect example, because if I go out there and let's say I get Blake Snell or Aaron Nola, and then rather than go to the Mariners, I make the trade with Tampa to get Tyler Glasnow, I've got 2 guys who could be aces. And if Tyler Glasnow is hurt half the season, Miles Michaelis steps into that role, and now you're the problem is you got to make sure your depth is ready to go in that sense. So if you're going to make that trade, then you're going to have to either make another trade to add somebody who could be a 5, but maybe he could get to like a 4 or a 3 for you, because if you lose Glasnow, Michaelis is stepping up, Matz is stepping up, and now you're going into that depth pool again, to where when you start shoving guys up 3 or 4 spots to where they're supposed to be, you're sitting in a bad position. But if you go get that number 1 guy, like that dude, the one that BT always talks about, saying, oh bleep, we got to face him, yep, I'd be willing to take a risk, because you have the potential of getting 2 guys that are like that.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it on guys with upside, and even guys that even have like upside as 3s that have good swing and miss stuff. Because
like Mahle?
Yeah, because I look at those guys and I say, one, if they get hurt and that's the end of my season, then I didn't do a good enough job in the offseason of building depth or at the trade deadline. And like that's what the Cardinals, as much as we talk about the Major League Club and having to revamp this rotation, the goal of the deadline, and I think they did a good job of this, was also supplementing the minor leagues with depth pieces. And you hope a Graceffa, McGreevy, someone like that can step into a role and just fill it until you get to July. That is the main, or the end of July. The main part of this is I like the upside, because if one of those guys does get hurt early on in the year, what am I going to do? I'm going to go either survive with my rookie that I have in the minor leagues, or a guy in the minor leagues that can fill his spot and be adequate in terms of being as a 5, or I'm going to go trade for somebody at the deadline and go fix the rotation like the Cardinals have done in the past. And the other thing for me, too, is as much as we want to say like a Nola has certainty, a Giolito has certainty should never be attached to a pitcher. So I never look at it and say, oh, well, if I sign Nola to a 6-year contract, he's going to be healthy for all 6 years. Yeah, sure, he has a track record of not being hurt, but it takes one injury to have, we talk about all the time, the connective chain in the arm of dealing with one issue that suddenly leads to the next, to boom, Tommy John. So it just takes one injury to snowball into that. So I never look at any pitcher and say, oh, they've got certainty. That's why I'm willing to risk it on anybody that's had injuries or doesn't have injuries in their past.
Tyler Glasnow looks so freaking good right now, but my worry is I'm falling for the one season where he's incredible and it doesn't pan out next year.
Tyler Glasnow is Tyler O'Neill, but he's always successful when he's there. Like, the 2021 season for Tyler O'Neill, that is who Tyler Glasnow is every time that he's healthy. The problem is he's never healthy. He plays about as much as you see, or pitches about as often as Tyler O'Neill plays.
You're lucky to get 100 innings out of him. Yep. I mean, he's only done it once, and he's at 68.2 right now. But my God, he's got 96 strikeouts so far this season.
Yeah, over the last 3 seasons, 2021 to today, he's thrown 28 games. He's started 28 games and has 165 innings. That would be a really good season. Now, the thing is, in those 28 starts, he has a 2.8 ERA and has an ERA plus of 150. So he is an ace every time that he is on the mound. He's just not on the mound very often. And the reason why I even bring his name up, guys, because I'm sure there will be some in the listening audience that say, guys, he's not even realistic. Well, he's finally going to start making real money next year. He signed that 2-year contract with the Rays, where this year he's making like $7 million, and next year he's making more than 20.
He makes $25 million next year.
There you go. He made no money this year because they wanted to have him for this season. I would be legitimately shocked if he's not traded this offseason.
Yeah.
Tyler Glasnow is going to be traded. It's a matter of where. And they're going to get something of significance in return.
Problem is, if the Cardinals acquire that, they're not spending it on the top echelon
he
guy.
ends up probably replacing one of the big starters that we talked about.
Snell, Giolito contract.
And that's where my concern would be.
Yeah,
but I think if you're getting that
on a
guy,
1-year deal. That's the other thing that's important here is you have less risk long term, but more risk on 24.
But I also don't know if I don't have him, I don't have a number one.
Sure.
I think when he's healthy, he's number one.
What I'm saying, if I'm going the risk factor, he's probably going to get hurt. And I don't have a one.
That's what we just said. And you said you would sign up for that.
No, I'd say I'd sign up if I had the Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow. Because the problem is if I lose Glasnow and he's my number one and I don't get a legit 2 who could be a 1.
This is where the Japanese lefty comes in.
Yeah.
If you're able to get that guy for $15 million and you're able to get $25 million for Glasnow next year, you could probably make that work money-wise in St. Louis. Or you're having to go to get like a James Paxton. Like, if you're going to bet on players, the players that you do it are guys that have that serious upside, but also that you feel like they can outperform whatever it is that the contract is that you're giving to them. So Glasnow you're getting on a big-time money deal, but it's 1 year. If you're betting on Blake Snell, it could go wrong for 5. If you're betting on Aaron Nola, it could go wrong for 6. If you're betting on Lucas Giolito, that's a 5 or a 6-year deal as well. If Glasnow goes south, well, it's a 1-year deal. You'll figure it out the following offseason, and hopefully some of the internal options have been able to pick up the slack. And you can go right back to the market and maybe even trade for a guy or spend money on another guy. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting proposition. I think he's maybe the most compelling option for the Cardinals this offseason because of what you can dream on and what you're terrified of. There's a big gap between those two things. NFL Quick Hitters is next. (99646) is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show right now. It is time for NFL Quick Hitters. Guys, the NFL season is officially upon us. You see that barn burner last night, 21-16. Browns getting the big W?
No.
Saw Canton forgot to pay their electric bill.
What happened?
Wait, what?
The
Did you
lights
not
went
see
out in
this?
the game.
Not only
And did
that,
you see the
Illuminati
showers weren't
2.0?
working?
Showers didn't work after the game.
Oh, well, that's fine. You just go home and shower.
They're in Canton.
Oh, well, that's a problem.
Yeah. It's not the easiest
Find
thing.
a nice Airbnb, I guess.
So I don't want to discuss anything from that godforsaken game last night. I hope none of you watched it. If you were, I hope you were listening to the game here on 101 ESPN.
Changing my daughter's poopy diaper might
Which
have been
team
more
is
fun.
more likely to win their division, though, this year? The Browns or the Jets?
I think I would say the Jets. I understand it's a tougher division, but like they've got more talent than the Browns do. Like the Browns just don't seem like, other than Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb, I'm not sure that I could name 5 people on that roster. Like Deshaun Watson. Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. But I'm not sure I'm sold on Deshaun Watson anymore. So yeah, I think I would say the Jets.
I think I would too, because I can see where Buffalo takes a step back. And if Tua can't stay healthy, then Miami's not going to be the team that we all expect them to be. So I would say the Jets. I think you know what you're getting from Rodgers. Though he had a down year last year, he's better than what you had in the guy that started the game for you last night. And then when I look at Cleveland, Cleveland, there's no chance you're beating Cincinnati.
I was about to say, the best team that we're talking about in either of these two teams is Cincinnati, or either of these two divisions.
And Baltimore's going to have probably a really good year now if they've got a competent offensive coordinator and they've given Lamar some weapons.
I think the Jets are better than the Browns are straight up. And I think that the Bengals are better as a division winner than the Bills are. So I'm going with the Jets as well. I think you guys are 100% right on these two.
I think the better question would be, who would you guarantee would be last in their division? It'd be
Out
the
of those
Browns,
two?
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because I can't see the
higher
Jets
on the Jets than I am on the Browns.
New England sucks.
I was going to say, but does Pittsburgh suck? Not sure yet.
No, I don't think so.
I think
Pittsburgh's going to be okay.
Kenny Smallhands hasn't got me bought in yet.
Really? I'm in on Pickett.
I think he's fine. I think he's Jared Goff. Like that level of quarterback. And you can win 9 games with that guy.
He's got pieces around him. You can win with him.
I don't think they have the Detroit Lions pieces around them, though.
I think they've got a much better defense.
Yeah.
And I think that matters for them. If you guys could guarantee any team not named the Chiefs or the Bengals to win their division this year, you have to bet all of your money for this team to win their division in 2023. Who are you going with?
Jaguars.
Interesting.
I think that to me is the easiest division win in the AFC right now. Just Jacksonville, I mean, the hype around that team seems real. We saw what they could do with competent coaching last season. Trevor Lawrence felt like he had his breakthrough. And what I always seem to keep forgetting is Calvin Ridley is coming back. And that's massive for them. Like, they already have the weapons in place and add in Calvin Ridley. So I think the Jaguars are going to run away with it in the AFC South.
I'd probably go Detroit. I think that's who I'd put my money. I'm not sold on everybody else in the North. I think Green Bay, not a lot of love in Green Bay. Minnesota, I'm not in on Cousins. I think they're going to take a step back. I think they got worse. And, their record in one-score games was ridiculous last year. In Chicago, I think they've gotten better, but I can't see them competing for that division. So I would go Detroit. I think Detroit's clearly at least a 10-11 win team, and I think that guarantees you to win the NFC North.
I'm surprised neither of you guys said who I think are the 2 best teams in the NFC.
San Francisco or Philly?
Yeah.
I think I can see. I thought about Philly, but I just feel like they belong in the same conversation as Kansas City and Cincinnati. Too. And then San Francisco, I think Seattle's going to push San Francisco.
I think Seattle wins that division.
I do. I think I'm not going to say Seattle yet, but I think they are definitely going to be a team that pushes San Francisco.
I think
their offense could be special this year.
I just talked about the playmakers for Jacksonville. Seattle's got better playmakers, especially now with their 2 legit running back options that they have, where Pete Carroll likes to have those. That all comes down to Geno Smith, and we saw it last year.
I'll go with the Eagles since you guys didn't. You left the easy one out there for me. That's the team that I would bet on. If I had to guarantee all of my money on one team that will win their division, not named Kansas City or Cincinnati, I would go with the Eagles. Final thing here for you guys. Last year, if you were somebody that was playing fantasy football and you bet on the Lions offense, and you were just like, hey, I'm going to get a bunch of players from this offense. You targeted them. They were all undervalued. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a very good pick for you. Jamal Williams, very good pick for you. Jared Goff gave you usable
I
weeks
had
last
Goff and
year.
St. Brown.
Early on in the
Chef's
season, TJ Hawkinson, really good tight end for you. You had a bunch of usable pieces out of that offense. Who is the team this year that you think will be undervalued in fantasy the way that the Detroit Lions were a year ago, where you could get those guys at a discount because it's not the sexy Chiefs or the Eagles? Seahawks are kind of up there right now in terms of teams that everybody wants to bet on. Who's the team that you want to bet on their offense because they're undervalued relative to what they're going to give you this season?
I mean, I know I just said that they're terrible, but it would be Cleveland, which
Nick Chubb,
you've got Amari Cooper, you've got Elijah Moore's there. Yeah, Elijah Moore is there from the Jets last year. And then you got Deshaun Watson. Like, if Deshaun Watson, I'm not buying it, but nobody's going to be expecting him to be good this year. Deshaun Watson could go off with those weapons, and with Nick Chubb, that's a team that could probably put up numbers.
Yeah, two teams that kind of pop into this category for me. The Bears are one. I think they've got I think Justin Fields takes the next step, and he's a running quarterback, so he can get more. I think he can be a guy that can put up kind of not Justin Field numbers, excuse me.
Jalen Hurts.
Thank you.
He can
Jalen
put
Hurts
up Justin Fields numbers.
Yeah, I think he can get closer to Jalen Hurts-esque numbers. I think they've got some decent wide receivers there. And then the other team, and I think they're going to be undersold because I think a lot of people lost faith in the QB.
You're not taking the team that I'm going with. Oh, let me get it. Let me give it. It's my
let
team.
him have it. It's his show.
You already got a team you put.
Go ahead.
The Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, that's not who I was going to say.
Oh, really?
I was going to say the Broncos. I could see where I think if Sean Payton is right and it was a Hackett issue, I could see where some of their weapons go lower. I'm not saying draft Russell Wilson because that cooking was bad last year, but I would say Judy Sutton. I think those guys could get undervalued this year to where maybe
Sutton just get hurt.
Does he deal with this?
Tim Patrick did.
Oh, Tim Patrick, that's who it was.
Hurt.
Sorry.
But I can see where those two get a little undervalued because of last season for Russ, where I think if Sean Payton gets in there and just makes Russ an average quarterback, those numbers go up significantly.
Lamar Jackson's the 5th quarterback going in fantasy drafts right now. He should be top 3. If you're looking at their wide receiver core, if Lamar Jackson ends up being as good as I think he can be this year, somebody from that wide receiver core is going to pop. And they're not going very high in drafts right now. You could get Zay Flowers late. You can get Rashad Bateman late. Odell Beckham would probably be my 3rd choice from their receiver core. He's going relatively late this year as well. And Mark Andrews is always a stud tight end. Whenever he's healthy and he's on the field, he's going to be a stud for you in your fantasy draft. So I love the Ravens offense. They've been a super slow-paced team in previous years. I think they're going to speed things up. I think they're going to throw a hell of a lot more this year than they have previously because they've got a new offensive coordinator in there. If I'm betting on one undervalued offense this offseason, it would be the Baltimore Ravens. Injury and coaching. Those are the two things that have changed for them this year. They've added in some weapons. I think they're going to be a really good fantasy option to target for you guys in your drafts this year. Coming up next, I like Alec Burleson. Everybody else seems to hate him. What can he do to work his way into the Cardinals' plans next year? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals fell to Minnesota last night 5-3 as they dropped 2 of 3 to the Twins. And they'll be back in action tonight as they start a 3-game set against the Colorado Rockies. 7:15 will be first pitch as Chris Flexen gets the start for Colorado. And Adam Wainwright will be on the mound for St. Louis. And the big news out of college football today, Oregon and Washington will be joining the Big Ten. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Like that, everything's on the barrel. Line drive, home run into the Cardinals bullpen.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. That's what it sounded like last night. Another home run for Alec Burleson. 2 straight games for a homer, or with a homer for Alec Burleson. That's what it sounded like last night on Bally Sports Midwest. Alex, dating back to July 1st, Alec Burleson has been on a heater. He's batting .325 with an OPS over 900 in that stretch. He started just 15 games, but has appeared in 24 of them and has about 65 at-bats in that month-and-a-half stretch. Alec Burleson's a guy that I want to see a lot of down the stretch, and I think we're going to see a lot of. He told Derek Gould yesterday, I'm excited to get some at-bats to get myself in a groove. I haven't mastered it yet, but I've gotten better at playing sporadically and really just focusing on that day. But right now, I'm looking forward to the day where I can get those consistent at-bats, get those consistent games, and see what happens from there. That was Burleson's perspective on what this season has been, how it's been tough to really get into a groove of things when he's been kind of coming off the bench a decent amount. Here's what Ollie Marmol had to say about Burleson getting those at-bats.
I think if you give him enough at-bats, you're going to see a guy that can really hit. He doesn't swing and miss much. He puts the ball in play. He gets to the hoppy fastball at the top of the zone. He has different ways of beating you. It's going to be tricky just because of the outfield situation to get him those at-bats, because you're also looking to do the same thing with Dylan Carlson. So with T.O. and Newt and Walker, and then you're trying to get at-bats for those 2 guys. You rotate them as much as possible. And what we'll do with Tyler moving forward is kind of somewhere around 5 games a week where he's on for 2, off a full day like today, and then on for 3, that type of thing. So you'll be able to slide in Dylan and Burleson appropriately. But, yeah, I think if you were to give that kid a stretch of at-bats, you'd see a pretty darn good hitter.
Alex, if I saw one guy this offseason that I think could come back to burn the Cardinals if they decided to move on from him, I think it might be Alec Burleson. Now, I'm not talking about in like the Donovan, Gorman, Newt Bar category, because we know those guys can burn you. If you end up trading them, they're probably going to go on elsewhere to have real success. But the guys that have had underwhelming careers so far here in St. Louis that you trade, and then it's like, whoa, wait, they could do that, and you didn't find out about it here, I think Burleson absolutely fits into that category for me. He hits the ball really hard. He never strikes out. He strikes out 11% of the time. He's one of the best non-strikeout guys in all of Major League Baseball. And now you're starting to see some of the actual statistics catching up to his expected numbers. I like him a lot. A left-handed bat that hits for power, that hits for crazy good contact. I want to build around this guy. So the rest of the year, especially with that DH opening up a bit now that Brendan Donovan has been placed on the injured list for the rest of the season with the surgery to his elbow, I want to see Alec Burleson get a bunch of at-bats to find out what you really have here before the end of the season.
Yeah, I think Burleson should be the everyday DH, and then when he's not the DH, he should be playing a corner outfield spot, because that's when you're getting certain guys off of their feet. Honestly, I think there's a blessing in disguise of him not getting a lot of playtime this year, but also figuring out, as he said to Derek Gould, how to approach a season when you're not consistently at the plate. Because the best thing for this team is having a weapon like that who knows how to hit off of the bench. I thought that's what Matt Adams was so useful for when he wasn't the everyday first baseman, was how good of a pinch hitter he truly was for that team. And frankly, this team doesn't really have that in terms of consistency off the bench. So that's great for him. And then next season, give him those everyday reps, because hopefully by then you've figured out this minutia of 2 or 3 catchers, having 6 outfielders. What are you doing with certain guys in certain areas? You've eliminated all of those questions so that you can say, out of the 5-6 days that we're playing in a week, I know that 4-5 of those games, Alec Burleson is getting 3 or 4 at-bats because he is a vital piece. Now, to where T-Bone and I are on the same page, I'm not saying he's untouchable, because if somebody calls and says, Alec Burleson, we want him, great. Let's figure out what the best return is for me. But if you run it back with him as your fourth outfielder / DH / first baseman, that's only going to benefit your team next year.
Yeah, look, I'm glad to see the success he's having, because he is a guy that, now that I'm starting to see the actual results instead of having to hear BK tell me about the expected numbers, I'm starting to fall more in love with Alec Burleson. But with that being said, I do like the fact that he's a guy that I view as a fourth outfielder / backup first baseman / can start at DH, and seeing that he's been able to come off the bench and adjust to being a bench back, because those guys are important. Those guys are critical parts of teams that like to play splits and like to pinch hit for hitters late in game and know, okay, at least we're going to get some contact and we'll see what happens when Burley comes to the plate. I think the other good thing, too, is I'm glad to see he can potentially, with a good second half here, really increase his trade value, because though he's not a guy, I think he falls into the same category as a Gorman, Newbar, Donovan, where you probably don't want to trade him because of that thought process of, yeah, okay, if he does hit his potential, he could come back to hurt us. The problem for Burleson is he's just kind of blocked as an everyday player right now. He's not a starting corner outfielder for you moving forward. He's not the starting first baseman moving forward unless you're moving on from Goldie after his next contract. And the DH spot, maybe you could argue he's there, but I think there's going to be kind of a split between Gorman, Donovan in that spot. And Contreras potentially being there too 50% of the time. So that's where I like to see this good second half from him, where if you do hold on to him, I go, okay, you've got a really good bat. And maybe even the best case scenario, you got a really great trade chip that you could move on from for a guy that is blocked in your system right now.
314-399-9646. This one comes from the 731. Guys, Burleson's been in the lineup pretty regularly all season long. What are you talking about? Well,
that's true.
Guess it depends. Do you think that Dylan Carlson has had regular opportunities? Because they have been basically the same in terms of their opportunities so far this year. They have the same number of plate appearances. They have the same number of starts and the same number of games played.
That's what this was. This had nothing to do with Alec Burleson. He was finding a way to get Dylan Carlson.
I'm really not, but I hear so much about how Dylan Carlson needs more opportunities to become a guy that plays regularly. If we feel that way about Carlson, the same is true for Alec Burleson. I don't feel that way about either, honestly. I think they've both been utilized correctly so far this year. And now that you are out of the race, I would use Alec Burleson more often than what we had seen previously. He just mentioned it. Tyler O'Neill's going to get a couple of days off every week. I want to see Burleson get those opportunities. You no longer have Brendan Donovan in the DH spot every day right now. Burleson should get a decent amount of those opportunities. Let's find out what you got. I think he looks like a really good hitter at the major league level. Hits the ball hard, doesn't whiff, gets on, this is a guy that I want to bet on. Left-handed bat. He comes with prospect pedigree. He was a top 100 prospect in all of Major League Baseball, and I feel like he's the least celebrated top 100 prospect in the history of the Cardinals. This is a guy that could be a really good player for you right now. But he could also be a trade chip. So whether it's showcasing him for other teams to show them what he could be for them, or it's finding out what he could be for you long term, let's see. Let's see what it looks like, because I think Burleson can be a good player for you. And I do think if you don't find out, this is a guy that could come back to ultimately bite you.
The simple part is you're going to have a guy that you can use a lot next season as the fourth outfielder if Jordan Walker's development doesn't go, / if Tyler O'Neill can't stay healthy, which, I mean, one of those two things is going to happen next year. You're going to have somebody that you can trust to run that sustained period of time. Is Alec Burleson that guy? Because you're not only trusting the bat for that sustained period, but you're trusting the defense that he's going to provide in one of those corner outfield spots.
People overestimate how bad he is defensively. He's not good.
Average out there.
He's if you wanted, I'm trying to think of a good comp. Kyle Schwarber. He doesn't have the same bat as Schwarber. They profile very differently. Burleson's more hit than power. Schwarber's all power, no hit. But defensively, he's way better than Kyle Schwarber. He right now is significantly better in the outfield than Jordan Walker.
But you feel fine, let's say, if Tyler O'Neill gets hurt next year and your outfield is Burleson, Newbar, and Walker.
I don't know that it needs to be. Do I have Brendan Donovan on my team? Because
Well,
Brendan Donovan's getting those opportunities.
And even if Donovan's not, I think what would happen is, and this is where I think Edman would push out to probably center would be my guess, and they would slide Nootbaar into a corner. So you would still feel pretty good about the defense out
Burleson's a guy that I use kind of similarly to the way that they've used Donovan. That's how I kind of view him. Is he an everyday player in one position? No, I wouldn't view him that way. But can he start twice a week at DH, once a week at first base when Goldie's got a day off, and once a week in the outfield? Yeah. So you're getting 4 starts a week out of Burleson, which by the end of the season puts him at 400 to 500 plate appearances. I feel pretty good about that plan for Alec Burleson. And while it's not a regular, quote-unquote, and not an everyday starter, you end up with serious production out of a guy like Burleson in that regard. So I want to see what he does. I want to see what he looks like. He's not an untouchable for me, but if he ends up hitting the rest of the way, I would be much more likely to include Carlson or O'Neill in a deal than I would be with Alec Burleson. And if he has success, maybe it does make you more likely to trade a Brendan Donovan, because now you can't use him at second base or at shortstop, but you can use Burleson in the corner infield or the corner outfield or at first base and DH. So maybe Brendan Donovan does become a little bit more expendable if you get something good out of Alec Burleson, like what we've seen so far. Junk Drawer coming up next.
Back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Junk Drawer. We've had our jokes about Taylor Motter, Alex. I didn't feel like it was going to become a joke about Taylor Motter on the Minnesota Twins broadcast last night, though.
Oh, man, they're even taking shots at this poor guy.
Can you believe that?
Now I feel bad.
Taylor Motter was up to the plate with the game on the line last night, and the opposing broadcast, all they could do was joke.
I have a confession to make. I had completely forgotten that Taylor Motter was a Twin. In 2018, he had 19 at-bats and had 1 hit.
I had forgotten that, too.
There's a strike. Did you remember that he was with the Twins very briefly? Well, I don't feel so bad then.
I can't blame him for that. I mean, when you have 1 hit in 19 games, I might forget that also.
To be fair to him, it was 19 at-bats. Only 9 games that he was with the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, I can understand how you forget that.
Man, God bless Taylor Motter. I respect the hell out of what he's done. He is 33 years old. He has been up and down in the big league since 2016. He is now getting an extended run with the St. Louis Cardinals in 2023 at the age of 33. And the opposing team's broadcast is making jokes about, hey, did you know he played for us?
I don't know if that was a joke, though. I think they were actually like, I completely forgot this dude played for us. Like, I've had those moments before where, like, he played with the Blues? Really?
Who's the guy that immediately comes to mind for you when you're like, wait, that guy played here?
Mike Sillinger. Mike Sillinger was like a journeyman around the NHL. Then all of a sudden it's like, holy bleep, he played here for half of a season? I don't know if there's a guy like that on the Cardinals.
Do you have a guy like that for you, T-Bone? Maybe it was growing up or recently where you're like, man, you remember when that guy played here?
Not really that I can think of off the top of my head. Sometimes I forget D-Row was a Cardinal at one point. What the heck?
Sorry, Grant just talked to us, and we don't know how to navigate the volume on our headphones. So I'm cranked up all the way to hear Tanner talk and BK talk, and when Grant talks, it's like somebody is speaking into my eardrum.
I felt like a bee was like in BK's ear.
I mean, I don't panic as much as he panicked. He jumped like my wife jumps when like cannons go off at an event.
I thought he saw like a spider or something. Like he like literally took the headphones off and nearly fell over.
I mean,
if you missed that, make sure you go to our YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL and watch.
I was at a concert last night,
reaction.
so my ears are already jacked from loudness, so that didn't really affect me. But man, BK jumped higher than Joey did when he saw that remote control grasshopper.
I'm telling you, I think I lost partial hearing.
I wasn't quite sure what he's freaking because Grant did not talk in my ear. I have a different button that talks back to me.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm not blaming Grant at all. Like, this is not his fault. We have some headphone stuff that's been going on over the last really few months here.
And so,
like, I mean, listen, it's at this point we can get it out into the open.
By the way, we got some great texts on the line with this.
John Smoltz, did you know he was a Cardinal?
I did know he was a Cardinal.
See, the guy that always comes to my mind for it is D-Row, because D-Row was only here for what, the 09 second half?
Brad Penny. And the only reason I remember Brad Penny was here was because he hit a grand slam at a game that my dad and I was there. Really? And then he got hurt doing it and never pitched again. He retired after that injury. And I think it was running the bases he got injured.
Mark Grudzielanek is a good one.
See, I always remember that because he got the cycle. I think he's the last Cardinal to hit for the cycle. Now who's Mega Mine on the station?
John Smoltz is always the one that I go to.
Yeah, see, I just remember it being such a big deal like Larry Walker. When they acquired him, it's like, oh, damn.
Mark Reynolds, that's a good one. Yeah.
Mark Reynolds, Brandon Moss. Moss was here for 2 years,
had such a historically bad September that everybody remembers
Khalil Green.
It's a good one.
It's a very short sample size.
Do you guys remember Julio Lugo?
Julio Lugo. How about Ronnie Belliard?
Oh, that's a good one.
Ronnie Belliard was the one that with Jake Westbrook.
Dennis Eckersley.
I remember that one.
Gosh, until that
Sidney Ponson. Bud Norris. Remember Bud Norris? Because the talk was Bud Norris only beats the Cardinals.
No, Bud Norris was the bullying scandal.
Yeah.
He basically got Mike Matheny fired. Not him himself, but that scandal, I think the bad publicity from it was part of the beginning of the
I don't remember that, and I was
You don't?
covering the team at the time.
Oh, dude, that was the Jordan Hicks stuff.
That's why they let go of Norris,
Yeah.
even though Norris was like their
hazing?
closer at the time.
Like hazing?
I mean, I think it got blown way out of
I'll have to
proportion.
Google it.
Looking back on it, but yeah, that was.
I had a.
Will Clark. It's another one.
Someone said Randy Rosarena.
Fair.
Troy Gloss.
That's a
I
good one.
forgot about
That was
Gloss.
post
That's a
Scott
good one.
Rowland. That was a rough
Troy
time.
Gloss was a stud.
It
dude.
was, but man, that was a rough time because it's like when you get the first year after Yachty, you got the first year after Scott Rowland. It's like, really? This guy?
Somebody said Alex Reyes. Remember him? Yeah.
Ty Wigington.
Oh, come on.
Nick Punto.
Mark Ellis. You guys remember Mark Ellis as a Cardinal? It was terrible when he was here.
Yeah, nobody can say Reggie Sanders. Everybody remembers Reggie
he's
Sanders. He was a beast.
All right, coming up next. Speaking of guys that previously played for the Cardinals, did you know Jack Flaherty used to play for the Cardinals?
What?
Might be a forgotten trivia fact if he continues to pitch like he did last night. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Catch Wednesdays with Wayno every week on the opening drive. Adam Wainwright with us. It's Wednesdays with Wayno. Morning, guys. How's it going? Hey, it's BK. I got to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health because they've launched a new telehealth site. It's called Victory RX. Man, you can go there. You'll get prescribed your ED medication. It used to be so hard. You go to a portal. They'd give you 17 different ways to fill in the same exact information. Not anymore. Victory Men's Health is now allowing you to do the entire consult all via text. VictoryRx.com. VictoryRx.com. That's the place where you go. You'll get prescribed that ED medication. Victory Men's Health is a respected program. They have treated thousands of men in their standalone locations throughout the area, and now they're giving all of you easier access to the #1 selling ED medication. If you're curious how this works, it's a chewable tablet. It's got active ingredients with both Viagra and Cialis, and because it's chewable, it's not going to be affected by the food or the drink that you consume prior to. If you've got a pill, that can actually be messed up by some of the food or the drink that you consume prior to it. Not with VictoryRx.com. Go there today. VictoryRx.com. That's VictoryRx.com. Play hard.
is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Runner goes from first, strike 3 call. And the inning is over as Jack Flaherty, hey, there you go, back-to-back strikeouts for Flaherty, keeps 2 on base in a clean first inning with his new team.
New team, new everything, so a little bit, just like excited to, just new energy to be here. And but some of that's also just being in sync and a matter of that, which is kind of weird for having that much time off. But, that first inning, it was like, okay, we're right into this thing. You got to figure it out. The first 2 guys get on, so, and then you get Vlad coming up, so you figure it out right there.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That's what it sounded like last night as the Baltimore Orioles got a win against the Toronto Blue Jays with Jack Flaherty on the mound. Jack finished the game, guys, with a quality start. Went 6 innings, gave up just 1 earned run, and maybe most importantly, struck out 8, allowed just 4 hits, and the command was there for the vast majority of the game as well. Only walked 2. Alex, I saw some freaking out taking place on Twitter last night as everybody was kind of following along with what Jack Flaherty was doing in his first start with the Orioles.
Twitter Cardinals fans? No.
Yeah, who could have seen that one coming? We knew this was possible. We knew that it was even maybe likely that he got a little bit of an energy boost as he went to his new team that is in the pennant race. Jack Flaherty's always been capable of having games like he had yesterday against the Blue Jays. In fact, he had some of these games here in St. Louis earlier this season. 7 innings, no earned runs allowed, 10 strikeouts against the Milwaukee Brewers. You look back to what he did specifically against the Toronto Blue Jays in St. Louis in his first start of the season, where he went 5 innings, did not allow a run. Now, he had no command that day, but barely allowed anything, did not allow a hit that day. So we've seen stuff like this previously here in St. Louis, but man, did it get to you at all yesterday as you were watching this with Jack?
No, it didn't, because this is what I expected. Jack Flaherty goes elsewhere, and he performs well. I mean, it seems to be a narrative that happens when Cardinals players go elsewhere, they go on to have success. And that can be a shot at the Cardinals organization if you'd like, but it can also just be a change of scenery. A Jack Flaherty who was in a team that wasn't going anywhere towards a postseason berth this year, and a Jack Flaherty who was healthy this season. Sometimes it can kind of dissipate in terms of the energy that's provided into your outings, whereas you go to a Baltimore Orioles team, and I know people took his words and ran with it, saying, Jack, like, oh, I'm at a good team right now. Guys, he is on a good team right now.
I mean, we would have all said the same thing.
Absolutely.
If we were put into that spot.
And
you're in a crap situation, and then you go to a team that's contending. Like, what? There's only one way to answer the question of, are you excited to be with a contender? Yeah, things didn't go our way in St. Louis. I'm excited to be able to be in a
crappy team, and I went to a better team. Like,
only guy that may say opposite, Eduardo Rodriguez.
Yeah, clearly.
Very true, I guess. But, like, for him to perform that way, good for him. I still would have traded him any day of the week. If he goes out there and throws a perfect game at some point this season, I still would have traded him, because it just wasn't going to happen in St. Louis the way that it might happen elsewhere. Now, if he looks like a different pitcher for the rest of his career than what he did in St. Louis in terms of mechanics, velocity, pitches, then I got a problem with it. But for right now, that was Jack making his debut on a contending team.
I would also add this. I saw this in the first inning, and I was like, wait, what? He was throwing 97. He got up to 97 in the first inning of that game, and he was sitting like 94, 95. That was something where if it continued the rest of the way, I was going to be like, what the hell happened here? Like, there are some serious questions to be asked if that velocity sustained for Jack yesterday. It didn't. By the end of the game, really by the second inning, he was throwing 92, 93 on average, and he was right back to the same velocity that we've seen in St. Louis all year long. And he was just jacked up. He was super excited about the fact that he was playing for a legitimate contender, and he went out there in his first start, and he shoved. So kudos to him. Not surprised at all. I figured he would live up to the hope of what he was going to be there in Baltimore, especially in this first start. But he was basically the same pitcher after that first inning that we've seen for the vast majority of the season here in St. Louis. I hope he has success there, but I don't regret the trade at all. I think it was the right move at the time, and it remains the right move today.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he looked like the guy that you saw at times here in St. Louis this year. When he was right, it looked like the guy you saw like that, not the Milwaukee outing that you said, or in Cleveland when he went 7 innings allowed 1 earned. Like, it looked like the guy that you saw in spurts this year in St. Louis. Now, if that guy continues on and, like, this is just the beginning of something great for Jack and his time in Baltimore to the end of the year, okay, then I'm willing to hear the conversation. But I'm not going to overreact to his first start, because his next start, he could give up 5 earned runs in his next start and look like the guy that we kind of saw, like, against the Angels, that Jack Flaherty, where he gave up 9 runs in 4 innings. So I think that was one of those, like, you're right. I think he was excited to be in Baltimore, new opportunity, wanted to showcase himself. He had the velo up in the first inning. It dropped back to normal. And then it was one of those where, for whatever reason, everything's clicked for him in that start. We'll see what he looks like the rest of the way. But right now, no, I don't regret the trade at all.
We did get this text. We'll get this real quick before we talk to Chris Kerber on the other side. Cardinals used to make everybody better. Now it is the opposite. I don't think that's fair. I think the Cardinals deserve a lot of credit for getting Steven Matz back on track this season.
Look at Taylor Motter. He went 1 for 19 with Minnesota.
I think the Cardinals deserve a lot of credit for either seeing something in Jordan Montgomery that nobody else did, or taking Jordan Montgomery and turning him into a better pitcher than what he was previously. It's one of those two. Either they identified him in a way that other teams didn't, or they built him into something that other teams didn't see previously. So they deserve a little bit of credit for that. I would also add Jordan Hicks was a DFA candidate earlier this season. Then he became one of the better one of the better closers in all of baseball. Paul DeJong was able to get himself back on track. I think there are real frustrations with the Cardinals that are legitimate. I don't think this is one of them, not right now. I think that if you see next year they bring in pitchers that performed well elsewhere, and then they don't perform here, sure, there's questions to be asked about that. But I don't think this is a legitimate trend to really get frustrated about. Not right now.
No, I don't either. I think there can be legit concerns in terms of developing players in the system and getting them to the majors and having that be successful. And we're seeing that concern right now, especially on the pitching front. But when you talk about a guy like Jack Flaherty, who did it with the Cardinals multiple times, it just got to the point where it wasn't going to work again. And the Cardinals said, we've got to move on. And that's to me, that's one specific player right now. I mean, there are multiple guys that have gone elsewhere and struggled when they left the Cardinals, just like there have been guys that have come to the Cardinals and turned their career around.
Coming up next, we're going to talk to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by the voice of the Blues. He's Chris Kerber joining us here on the show. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, my man. How you doing today?
Brandon, all good, brother. How are you?
We are doing very well. So, Kerbs, there was some big news in the NHL a little bit earlier today. It looks like out in Washington, they're going to try to keep this group together. They re-signed Wilson to a 6-year deal. I wanted to ask you your perspective on this because it seems like in Pittsburgh and in Washington, they're doing everything they can to keep really the aging core around Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin. If Doug Armstrong were in charge of one of those two teams, how do you think he would have approached those?
They'd be gone. Not Sidney Crosby.
Sure.
Wilson, probably, but not Crosby. It's one of those tough situations here. Doug Armstrong was looking at his young core and then looking at the veteran cores. If you go back and you look at the Washington Capitals, and I'm going to get this stat close. I might mess it up because I'm trying to remember the nugget I worked up when we played in Washington this past season. But at the time, the Washington Capitals only had it was their goaltender. One of their goaltenders was the only one of their own draft picks that had played more than 50 games with the franchise in the last 10 years. In other words, they're drafting. Even though they were drafting lower because they'd been good for a while, they weren't getting the results of picking a Robert Thomas 20th, a Jordan Kyrou in the second round, right? A Colton Parayko in the third round. They weren't getting those kind of results from a draft standpoint, and so their cupboard is really bare. They have an issue where they're saying, okay, we don't want to put just a junk team around Alex Ovechkin because the biggest thing that's going to be going for the Washington Capitals is less about a Stanley Cup right now, and it's about Ovechkin chasing Gretzky for the most goals of all time. So the situations are a little different. I've often wondered if Doug Armstrong could have been more aggressive in keeping this team together, moving different pieces out to keep a David Perron, things like that. It just didn't go that way here, and we know that Doug is very pragmatic about his team. So having said that, I think the situation in Washington, he would have cut bait with guys a lot sooner than they have.
How does this fan base take that, Kerbs? And it's just big picture thinking to where, you've had so much success. You're watching Alex Ovechkin chase this historic milestone in Wayne Gretzky's total goals. But then that at the end of this Ovechkin honeymoon period, you're going to be in a 5, 6, 7-year rebuild.
I think you're just going to hang your head on the fun of still watching Alex Ovechkin, and maybe listen. They've made some trades. They've made some signings. They're trying to stay in that window. And the one thing that we do know, guys, I mean, and we saw that all the way back into back in 2011 with the LA Kings, and like just get in. Because once you're in, anything can happen. I mean, look what happened to the Boston Bruins, who had the best regular season in the history of the game this past year and lost in the first round. I mean, you can go on runs once you're in. And so I think that's still part of the thought process as well. But I don't think anybody's going to look at that Washington roster and say, well, they're a Stanley Cup favorite based on how that is built. So, yeah, it's you're going to watch it, and you're going to realize you've had some good success. You've gotten to watch Oshie and Backstrom and Ovechkin and what Wilson's done. But in the end, you will pay the price, and the question is, how long will you be paying it? Will you pay it for 7 or 8 or 9 or 12 years like the Edmonton Oilers, or maybe 2 or 3 like the Blues are hoping?
Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joining us for another couple of minutes here on 101 ESPN. Kerbs, another extension that got done recently was Troy Terry signing a long-term deal with the Anaheim Ducks, about $7 million per year on that one. It got me to thinking about the future of Pavel Buchnevich here in St. Louis. Now, he's not eligible for an extension yet. He's got one more year before we get to those conversations. And at that point, he'll be 29 years old, entering his final year of his deal at $5.8 million. Kerbs, if we assume that Buchnevich has another good season this year, what kind of money do you think he's going to get on a long-term extension if he gets one here?
Man, it's a fascinating question, Brandon, because we've seen Doug Armstrong not want to extend too many guys into their 30s, right? The difference is Doug had Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko, those guys into year 30 and 31. To me, if he has another good year and still in his prime, he's easily looking at a 6x7, 6x8 type of contract or value in there, 7x7, in my opinion, without a doubt. And the Troy Terry one is a real interesting one, as you brought up. 25 years of age. He's only scored 20 goals in the league twice. He's had back-to-back 60-point seasons. What's fascinating to me about the Troy Terry contract is I think you're going to see, especially when the salary cap goes up after this season, what you're going to see is all of a sudden, I think that Thomas and Kyrou contract, and frankly, every one of the Blues' defensive contracts at 6.5, you're going to see those things looking really, really team-friendly and smart contracts by Doug Armstrong. That's the read that I got with Troy Terry. But, yeah, the Buchnevich one's going to be interesting. To me, I think if you let him get to free agency, he's going to have a number that's going to be hard to match. I'm trying to extend him early, and he has to be, I think, part of that key and a piece of your core as you try to become a winning team again.
Kerb's final one for me, and speaking of that core, The Athletic did a piece talking about the contributions to successful teams over the last 10 years with their entry-level contracts, meaning those young players coming up and being a part of the team in terms of production. Not this year, but could you see within the next couple of years the Blues having success with that entry-level contract contribution?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely you can. I'm excited to watch Jimmy Snuggerud again this year up at Minnesota and then have him turn pro. He's the kind of player that when he turns pro, he can come straight to the National Hockey League and be ready to go. By that point, you're talking about, some other guys in terms of Bolduc, Dean, coming along, where we see these guys. Dvorsky in a big way. Dvorsky's going to go back to Sweden this year, but maybe it's another year or two and he's over here young. I think, and especially, Alex, if what Doug Armstrong's plan in terms of a fairly quick turnaround is, some of those guys on those entry-level contracts are going to have to be productive pieces of this team for that turnaround to be successful.
Kerbs, we appreciate the time as always, man. I heard you talking earlier today on with the morning show about the anatomy of the draft. So if people want to hear your full thoughts on it, exactly what they'll be able to see on that, the new YouTube feature from the St. Louis Blues, check that out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app. It premieres on Monday, August 7th, a behind-the-scenes look at the Blues draft this year.
I'm excited for that.
Check that out on the YouTube channel. Really looking forward to it. Kerbs has a bunch of extended thoughts on it on the podcast page right now. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk with you again soon, my man.
All right, guys. Talk to you next week. Have a good weekend.
So you got it. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us here on 101 ESPN. Like I said, that YouTube thing is going to be sweet. We saw some of the way
trailer.
too early clip about a couple of weeks ago about it. I'll be interested to see what they reveal.
Were you curious like I was in terms of the trailer? And I hope I'm not exposing something I can't, but like just in the trailer that they released with us was talking about Doug conversing at the table of like, hey, we're seriously considering trading back. I really wonder, was that the first round? Because if that was the first round, I might be really disappointed because I thought Dalibor Dvorsky was the steal for them.
I don't think it was at the beginning of the first round. I think it was in the first round.
Maybe one of those later picks. That's a good point. I didn't even think of that. Because when I originally saw it, I'm like, man, were they talking about trading back from 10?
I don't think so. I mean, it could have been. That's one of the things
Seeing
that we'll
the
find out in
package that's
this.
out there, yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to find out kind of some of the behind the scenes of what that draft day was actually like.
Blue Note Productions with Trevor Nickerson and company over. I mean, it's phenomenal inside coverage that they're going to provide. So I can't wait for that on Monday.
What do you think Buchnevich ends up getting?
I think you're going
to... If we assume that he has another great year.
If like from the Blues or the market?
Either way.
Because
whatever you think he gets it.
I think the Blues would approach him next offseason, 5 years at $7.5 million.
I don't think he takes that.
I think he might take it depending on the direction of this team. And if he doesn't take it, you'll see him get 6 by 9. Someone will overpay that. The direction of the team, because Buchnevich wants to win.
Would you be willing to give him 8.5
for a lower term?
Say it's 5 years.
I'd have to see this year because if he goes through the injuries like he's gone
Health
through,
is a big part of this.
then no. But if he's healthy, I mean, to me, you're talking about a guy who could have 80-plus points on a season if he's healthy, and that's $8.5 million, especially if in 2 years, when that contract kicks in, the salary cap has gone up $10 million.
And the entry-level deals that you were just talking about, that makes it easier.
You're going to have 4 of them, potentially 5 of them on your team.
Yeah. Some of these tough deals on your defense core, they'll be gone because this will start in 2025. So at that point, you don't have Scandella. You'll be in the final year of that deal with Nick Leddy as well, and you only have 2 more years left of Torrey Krug as well, and maybe you're out of it at that point in time because I think isn't his no-trade clause more limited at the back end of this deal, Alex? For Torrey Krug.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you might be able to get out of those final 2 seasons as well.
Leddy's becomes...
He's only got 1 year left at that point, too. So even if he is
but
still
it's modified to where you can move that. And then I think Falk is the following year from there. So, but a lot of Buchnevich being willing to re-sign here, again, talking with him, he wants to win like most athletes do. I think that's going to come down to if he sees the direction of this team going north, because if it has the culture issues that was reported about this team next year, then I could see Booch not even wanting to be here.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's got to go here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN app now in the App Store or Google Play. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals fell to Minnesota last night 5-3, and they dropped 2-3 to Minnesota, and they'll be back in action tonight as they start their game set against Colorado Rockies. 7:15 will be first pitch as Chris Flexen's on the mound for Colorado. Adam Wainwright will get the start for St. Louis. And the big news out of college football today, Oregon and Washington will be leaving the Pac-12 and joining the Big Ten. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating air conditioning dealer.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN. Brought to you by Train Heating and Cooling. Visit traininfo.com. It's hard to stop a train. Count that big pen.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. 401's gotta go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's gotta go. Let's start with the one's gotta go. Cardinals position player edition, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, boy.
We already know, buddy. It's Dylan Carlson.
I'm not even going that route.
Oh, okay.
He's already traded in this one.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
right.
He was already
He's not
gone.
even an option here. Donovan, Gorman, Burleson, Newtbar. Left-handed bat edition.
It's either Donovan or Burleson, and I'm going to go with Donovan. Just because...
Based on the value?
Based on the value, and I've got the infielders. I'm keeping 2 of my outfielders, and I still got my second base covered, so I'm going to say Donovan.
I think I'm going Donovan as well. I got second base covered, as you just said. I still got outfielders in Newtbar. I guess O'Neill's in this scenario. And Walker and Burleson can kind of be that fourth guy and can also kind of split time at first base and DH. And, like, all those profiles are different. Newtbar, on base. Hopefully you develop more power. Burleson, contact hitter. Gorman, power. And then Donovan is also the second guy that's on base. I don't know if you need 2 of those guys in your lineup. So I'm more willing to move him than I am to get rid of someone that can just, as Eno Sarris would say, hit the crap out of the baseball in Nolan Gorman.
Yeah. I think it's Burleson for me, and I'm the guy that was really excited about him. I remain excited about Alec Burleson. But given the value that you're able to extract, if other teams see what we are currently watching, I think there's real value in Alec Burleson on the trade market this offseason. You're not going to get a number 1 starter for him, but could you get a guy that slots in as your number 4 starter for him in a package? Maybe. Maybe you could. I was just trying to do one of those nerdy spreadsheets, Alex, writing out, kind of mapping out what a week would look like with their current options in the lineup. Dude, the Cardinals have some serious decisions to make. Out of Edman, Burleson, Gorman, Donovan, Newtbar, Carlson, out of that group of 6, I think you probably have to remove 2 from the roster by the start of next season.
2?
And that's not including Tyler O'Neill, who you probably also have to remove. So if you don't get rid of Tyler O'Neill, you might have to get rid of 3 of those guys that I just mentioned. And that's just because you want them to be everyday players or something close to that to be able to extract the value. Or you trade them to get a guy who can impact your roster in a significant way next year. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, which one's got to go? Marvel Edition. Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, or the Hulk? Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, or the Hulk. I'll get started. If I had to get rid of one movie franchise from this, it's Hulk. They have the worst movie out of the
You and I were thinking differently. I wasn't even thinking movies. I was thinking of like
which hero?
Superhero, like how you'd still win. Because if it's movies, it's absolutely the Hulk.
Okay, let's think of it your way. Because that, I think, do you agree, T-Bone? Hulk is the worst movie?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Out of those 4?
Yeah. I mean,
who has the best out of those 4 in your mind?
I'd say Captain America.
Yeah, I think
all the
Captain America.
Americas were
Captain
great.
America and Iron Man
Winter
were really
Soldier,
close,
I think, is
though.
one of the best.
Yeah.
But Thor Ragnarok is also excellent.
I wasn't that big a fan of
Really?
Ragnarok.
Yeah.
I thought Ragnarok was great. Love and Thunder was one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Iron
Three
Man
of the
2
four
was
Thor
incredible.
movies have been awful, so let's not give them too much credit.
And I would argue you don't get the strongness of Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Civil War without Iron Man. But if I'm going my thought process there, Captain America would get the hell out of there.
What?
Really?
Yeah. Because I can win.
In terms of winning?
Yeah, in terms of winning. Like, cool, you're strong, dude.
Kidding me?
I'm gonna
Iron
keep
Man
the other
kind of
three.
ruins everything, if we're being honest.
He does, but
Like,
man,
none of it exists without him.
he's a badass.
I'm not going to, no spoilers here, but Iron Man's the reason why everything went to crap. So he's the one that's got to go. He always ruins everything for the group.
It's very true, but the other three are more badass. So I would.
What a thoughtful answer from BK.
Yeah,
it's
I had no thought process of there'd be no villains if
very
there
true,
was
though.
no Iron Man.
Yeah, he's the one that made everything go to crap. So he's the one that's got to go. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. One's got to go preseason edition. Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, or NHL.
Preseason?
Spring training's actually fun.
Yeah,
Really?
I think NHL preseason's fun too.
Every time I'm like,
It doesn't.
wow,
None
you
of
see
them
what
matter.
he did?
Like, do not pay attention because then you end up thinking that Logan Brown's going to be really good.
Hey,
You suddenly
Tampa
believe
Bay
that
saw
Taylor
something.
Motter's a really good player for the Cardinals.
I didn't say that. I just said he'd make the roster, and I was
the
right.
Flow Bros is what you called it.
Yeah.
You'll talk yourself into some crap players being really good.
True.
But in terms of enjoyment factor, I like watching
I
spring
get to
training.
see
It makes you feel good.
I get to see for my own team more of the future, which is a good thing. The other two, I don't feel like you get to see the future.
By the way, you mentioned the Flow Bros. Just reminded me. I remember in my honorable mention of the T-Bone 3 bold predictions before the season started that Motter and Donovan would be on the roster for the whole year. Man,
Pretty close.
It's pretty sad that I was almost right on Motter
Should have
being on
known
the
that was
roster.
the downfall of the team. I think I would get rid of the NFL.
I would too.
Because, like, the NBA is awful, but to me, the NFL is just like, can we just expedite this and get to the start of it?
Dude, that's how I feel about the NHL. None of those games matter at all.
I like the
You should
NHL.
listen to them right here on 101
Yeah, thanks,
ESPN.
buddy. Appreciate it. I'll have pre and
sound.
post games. I like the NHL for the first 3 or 4. The last 3 or 4 are just like, okay, this is a waste of time.
I think the reason I don't like the NFL one is because like none of the starters ever play. At least in the NHL, like
Or if
the
they
Blues
do, it's
will
like-
put some of their guys in there. In
That's because
Major
you're a
League
Rams
Baseball,
fan. A
you
lot of
see
teams
it.
do still play their starters. The Rams do not.
Boy, I
You're
didn't
like,
see any of those starters last night.
I think it's becoming more common for teams not to do it. Like I don't expect like
Get a
the
couple of
Jets, for
snaps.
example. Rodgers is not playing a preseason game. Would be my guess. Now maybe that's a bad example because they're an older team. A lot of these guys are not going to play, and that's why maybe it's just from the outside looking in. It feels like most of the starters don't play in the NFL than any other sport.
One's got to go. Players you would build around right now in Major League Baseball: O'Neal Cruz, Ellie De La Cruz, Bobby Witt Jr., or Jordan Walker. I've got a very clear answer on this. I would go O'Neal Cruz.
Yeah, same.
He's the one that does not belong with the rest of this group. He's a super fun player. The hit tool's not there the way that it is with any of these other guys.
Yeah,
right
it just seems like it's only power with him, and that could get you into a bad spot if you're relying that solely for your team to build around. So yeah, I would say him also.
Yeah, I think he's a good player, and I think he'll be a good player. I think he's been kind of overhyped based on his prospect status.
Yeah, the other three got. Have you guys seen what Bobby Witt Jr. is doing this year?
He's been great.
It's
since
really
his early season struggles.
It's really unfortunate he's with the Royals.
It really is.
It's like when you got Trout and Ohtani in LA. Like, it's unfortunate that you play there because it'd be nice to watch you elsewhere.
If you're somebody that hasn't watched Bobby Witt Jr. play this year, don't watch any of the rest of the Royals games. But watch when he goes up to the plate. He has been unbelievable lately. He's starting to click, and it looks like a legitimate superstar in the making right now. In the month of August, he's batting .462 with 1,200 OPS. Yes, I understand that it's only 3 games.
I was gonna say.
But if you date back to the start of
Cherry
July,
pick.
he's hitting .350 with an OPS over 1,000.
Cardinals should trade Carlson for him.
Potter's numbers are probably pretty good in the month of August.
Brady Singer, by the way. T-Bone mentioned him at the deadline.
Yesterday.
If you could get him for Carlson, and I think you maybe could in the offseason, Brady Singer would be a perfectly fine number 4 starter for the Cardinals.
He was great yesterday. The only reason I know that is because he's on my best ball team. I was like, man, I got a big spike in points. Why is that? Oh, because Singer went 8 innings against the Mets.
Nice.
Coming up next, it was a start yesterday for Matthew Liberatore. How does that play into the Cardinals' decisions with their rotation into the offseason? We'll hit it next here on 101 ESPN. It's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Just doesn't feel right going into the weekend this way.
What is this, man?
Just doesn't feel right.
T-Bone's already in weekend mode, baby.
It's not time for the junk drawer,
I'm ready for my cold beer and go do some grilling.
Well, let's hit the rewind
with the junk drawer back.
If you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire at Auto Centers.
If you go there, you'll see our interview with Eno Sarris from earlier today. We talked through a bunch of the Cardinals' options this offseason for their rotation, and one of the reasons why we're doing that, Alex, is because I just don't know that you can count on Matthew Liberatore to be one of your 5 starters going into 2024. If he ends up becoming that, he shows out really well in spring training and he wins a spot, and maybe he boots Steven Matz, for example, back to the bullpen next year. Great. That's awesome. Sounds great. But I don't know that I'm writing his name in pen no matter what happens down the stretch. Yesterday, it was kind of more of the same. Started out hitting 95, averaging about 94 on his fastball. By the end of the game, he was topping out at 93, sitting mostly 92. The curveball, 14 of the 18 that he threw were for balls. They were sitting on his fastball, which doesn't have a whole lot of movement. This is kind of who Matthew Liberatore's been. He's very young. There is still a lot of time with his development. And 2 years from now, he might be a solid mid-rotation starter. But right now, he's not that. You should continue throwing him out there every 5th day to find out what he is. But, Alex, I don't have a whole lot of confidence that we're going to change our evaluation of him by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody should be putting him in pen going into next season, because if you do, then you're letting the Cardinals off the hook of not trying to compete next year, because Matthew Liberatore, although he might still have upside in the Cardinals' eyes of being somebody who you can put into your rotation and rely on, he's not shown it yet. And if you're competing for 2024, you can't do the same thing that you did last year of saying, well, we've got options that can compete for one of these spots or that can be in consideration for one of these spots. You need to overhaul that rotation so that you say, we know what 1 through 5 looks like, and if somebody makes noise at spring training for me, then they'll have that opportunity to step in and say, nope, this is my spot, and that's the internal competition that you want.
So Ben Fred wrote about the rotation, and he included Matz and Liberatore in the discussion for the number 5 starter and said he thinks they've got 3 open spots in their rotation going into this offseason. So you got Michaelis and then one of Liberatore or Matz. You got to fill the other 3 spots somehow, some way. I think that he's right. And I think I would fill them with a guy from each of these different buckets. T-Bone, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I would fill one bucket of certainty. Now, it doesn't have to be a certainty of a number 1 starter, but a guy that I'm pretty confident I know what I'm getting out of him. So this would include like Logan Gilbert, Aaron Nola, Lucas Giolito, Sonny Gray. I'm pretty confident in what that player is going to be for the Cardinals next year. Fit into different spots in your rotation, but there's upside baked into it, and I know what the floor is there. I would also get one of the following for upside. There's fragility with these players, but the upside is really good. Blake Snell, Frankie Montas, Tyler Mahle, Tyler Glasnow. Again, all of them fit into different criterias. It depends on what you get with that certainty pitcher, but I like the idea of one of those players as well. And then I would add one cheap cost-controlled player. I don't know who that's going to be, but if you go out to the market and you sign Lucas Giolito and maybe you get like Frankie Montas as a bounce-back candidate, go trade for a really solid number 2 starter that is cost-controlled at this year's offseason as well. That's the way that I would do it. I would have 3 different buckets for the 3 different pitchers that I add to the rotation.
Yeah, I think that's the route that they need to go, and I agree with you. I think you need to get someone that's got the certainty that you look at and say, okay, at least we know with Nola, for example. Sure, he's had an ERA in the 4s the last 2 years, or 2 of the last 3 years, but we know he's going to eat innings for us. And if control, and we've heard Eno tell us and told us this today, control, you don't really lose that. It's stuff that you do lose. Well, then maybe he can become more of Michaelis in the years down the line of that contract. When he starts the contract, he'll be Michaelis plus. And then you get a guy that has the upside, even though there are potential injury concerns, like a Glasnow, who would probably be my number 1 target this offseason on the trade market, at least. And then you get someone that's cost control, where you give up from your surplus of options. I mean, you just said it in the last segment, and one's got to go. I mean, it's hard to kind of look at what they've got right now and figure out how you're going to get playing time to everybody if you're trying to get everybody 5 games in 7 days. So I think that's the route that they're going to have to go, and that's where I hope that they look to target someone like a Giolito's my number 1 target on the market. You trade for someone that, though, does have injury risk. You're willing to do it, and then you're also willing to part with pieces to go out and get someone with cost control arms. That's why I thought they had to kind of try and jumpstart the offseason at the deadline, try and get that out of the way. They just weren't able to. Now it just adds to the laundry list of things they've got to accomplish this offseason.
It's all about trickle-down effect for me. And the way I look at it is Michaelis should be a number 3 next season for you. But if an injury takes place, Michaelis does not need to slide up to the number 1 spot and cover for that ace, which that's where the certainty comes into play. If I'm signing somebody, it's somebody that I know all season is going to be my ace. And if I lose him, yeah, I'm going to be bleeped, but that's how anything goes. If anybody loses their ace, it's going to be tough to overcome that. But what I can't have happen is the risk factor be the number 1 guy, because Michaelis then slides into that number 1 spot. And now I'm in the same spot where I have a lot of guys who could be 2s or 3s, but not a number 1. So get the certainty, make sure you have that, then take the risk on number 2, or take the risk on a guy that's like a number 4, but could move up to a number 2.
I think one of the 2 pitchers from Japan would be my top target this offseason. Go either way. I don't care which one you go with. I think those guys, for me, given what they represent and what the Cardinals need right now, probably going to be a little cheaper than going out and acquiring a Giolito or a Snell or a Nola, because there's more uncertainty baked into their projections.
I was just going to ask, is that considered certainty, though?
No, it's more uncertain, because you don't know what the upside that is there is legitimate number 1 starter. Like that, you could sign your number 1 starter via Japan this offseason. That is very much possible. The downside is they're like a 3 starter. I mean, Kodai Senga came over this offseason, and I think you could write him in as a number 2 starter in a rotation going into the postseason, and you feel pretty good about it, given what his stuff looks like, given what the results have been for him so far. So if you're telling me I could get one of those guys on a 5-year deal worth $15 million per year, the way that Senga signed last offseason, yeah, I would sign up for that right now. So sign one of those guys, and then with the money that you have left over, the second starter that you get, that's where you make your splash. You get somebody for like $25 million. Maybe that's Tyler Glasnow. You trade for him on a 1-year, $25 million deal. Maybe it's Lucas Giolito. Maybe you decide, you know what? I actually really like Blake Snell, and the market hasn't developed for him the way that we thought. Let's give him $25 million a year. He can be a number 2 starter for us. He doesn't go as deep into games, but the stuff is really there. And then for that third guy that you get, that's where you go target somebody from the Marlins or the Mariners, and you get that number 4 starter that can come in and is cost controlled and cheap for you. I think that's ideally what the Cardinals will do in the offseason.
That would be considered an A+ offseason for me by that Cardinals team, because that's breaking the mold of what you typically do.
Yeah, well, I agree there, because I think every question we seem to get every time we do questions, the answer is, what's your confidence in the team doing that? And it's hard to say I have confidence doing it, because they haven't done anything but a pop gun offseason for the last 4 or 5 years. Right. And that's not even an option for them this year. So I'm fascinated to see what they end up doing. I think if I had to guess kind of right now, my assumption is that they are going to – I think we're now right on this Japanese pitcher, the lefty from Japan. I think he's probably one of their top targets. And then I think they're also going to explore looking at one of the Mariners or Marlins pitchers, potentially Glasnow. And if a market doesn't develop for somebody, they try and do it. I kind of hope that they kind of wait and see how the market develops instead of trying to jump the gun on it this year.
So somebody on the text line said, guys, who are the 2 Japanese pitchers that are available? I'm going to call him Yoshi. Yamamoto is one of them. He is considered to be the top guy by most experts on who's going to get the most money this offseason. But Eno Sarris mentioned another one. He's 29 years old, so he's going to command a little less money, probably fewer years on the open market. And Eno said he actually thinks he has better stuff, and that's Shota Imanaga?
Imanaga, yeah.
That's the second Japanese pitcher. I'm terrible with these pronunciations. I apologize. But those are the 2 that are like at the top of the tier coming over this offseason. If you got one of those 2 guys, I think you feel pretty good about locking in that number 2 slot into your rotation.
But don't just stop there.
No.
Do not say that's it. You have to continue to push there.
You got to get aggressive.
And that's where my concern comes into play, to the question that T-Bone asked. That's where my concern level comes into play. You get that prized possession, and then you say, good to go.
Looking forward to talking with you guys on Monday. Alex, do you have something going on later on this afternoon?
I do. I'm going to be headed up to the Federated Auto Parts Raceway on I-55 in Pevely, Missouri. I'll be there till 5 o'clock for the Ironman 55, the World of Outlaws NOS Energy. Sprint cars are back for the high-speed weekend, including the most challenging race on the tour, which is the Ironman 55. So come on out. Say hi to me. I'll be there till 5 o'clock. Federated Auto Parts Raceway in Pevely, Missouri.
You can listen to the Fast Lane while you're on your way to say hello to Alex Ferrario. Enjoy your week in St. Louis. We'll talk to you guys on Monday at 11 a.m.